Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. Just testing out that 1980 Vibrolux reverb. And it's got a little bit of a higher hiss than I'd like. I don't know if it's coming through on your end. I doubt it. I did a test about an hour ago, and I couldn't really hear the hiss from what the mic's picking up because of how our ears hear, how we can, in real time, focus on something that's a lower level, and we hear that thing that's a lower level. But microphones just hear things at a fixed level, and all the quiet stuff is down in the recesses, so to speak. So but I'm gonna play around with some. I think the tubes are not the issue. I'm gonna clean the sockets one more time and then play around with some plate resistors, get it just perfect, which I have time to do since I've got to get the sorry, I'm multitasking. I've got to get the speakers installed for this thing. I think that'll work. So, how's everyone doing? It is a really stormy, rainy Saturday here, as I try not to hit this headstock on this old Mackie mixer. The Mackie has come out of storage. I've fixed a few things in it and cleaned it, which in other streams, I'm not going to do it today. I can go between the mic and the digital stuff much more easily without having to futz with different levels on the interface. But it's an endless process. So later I'll get a Motu M4 or some other interface with more inputs, so I can have a dedicated input set for the mic and a dedicated input set for the digital stuff, and maybe two mics, for the guitars, as opposed to just one, because I need one pre for my lovely speaking voice, as you all know. Let's see, any questions here? Let's see, I saw some questions ahead of time. Before we get started, please, pretty please, right down here, put question marks before any questions. It helps them pop out of the chat so I can see them. Telly Blaster's got it. I may have to change to a Telly in your honor. And please only ask any one question once. You can ask more than one question, but ask one question once and I will get to it in the order it was asked. And if you're watching and you asked a question and you think that I haven't seen your question, I probably haven't gotten to it yet, so you can scroll up and look at where I'm at in this chat, because I get behind. Last week I did legitimately miss some questions. To those viewers, I apologize. I don't ever mean to, but sometimes it happens. So, Michael Fielka, still troubleshooting Silverface Bassman 100, slight hum from speaker in standby. The hum is nearly gone with the chassis out, but shielded. Ever had this? Sturdy sheet metal in the cabinet. Well, there are two things that come to mind. First of all, you should not have any hum from the speaker when the amp is in standby. You've got a noise field being emanated from one of those transformers that's being picked up by the other one. So, it could be a problem with the shielding on your power transformer. Your power transformer hardware may not be tight to the chassis, or you may have just a very noisy power transformer. On some amps, it means that the output transformer is in the wrong orientation. It needs to be rotated 90 degrees or is too close to the power transformer. But in a Bassman 100, that should not be an issue. The other issue is what you're describing with the shielding. If you have an imperfect contact between the shielding inside a Fender cabinet or any amp cabinet and the chassis, that imperfect contact is worse than having no shielding at all, because it forms a capacitive layer, and that capacitance basically acts as a noise antenna. You can test this in any Fender style amp if you loosen the hardware that mounts the chassis to the cabinet so that the whole thing drops down by just a fraction of an inch. You can hear the noise increase and then go away if you press up and press the chassis into the not usually sheet metal in a Fender. Usually it's actually screen porch material, just screen mesh. Sometimes cleaning both surfaces works. You don't want to use anything too caustic on the mesh inside the cabinet because you don't want to damage the Tolex or the wood. But you get in there with a brush and some naphtha, or maybe a little bit of isopropyl if you're careful not to get it onto the Tolex. It won't hurt the wood too much, but don't get on the Tolex. And then just clean the corresponding parts of your chassis. Everyone says very nice things. I appreciate that. Telly Blaster, the bias pot cap for noise reduction on a deluxe reverb. How do you calculate the value? I added a 22 microfarad 100 volt to his. He added, sorry, it's hard to do this while changing persons and tenses and all that. And my mother is doing much better, thank you. She is really doing very well. It was looking really bad for a long time, but she's making huge strides. Quite literally, she's able to walk again. Basically, you got to look at whether you want to have all the filtering done in one stage, which is kind of what Fender did in a lot of their amps, with just the one cap, or whether you want to do it like Fender did in the Bassman and Tweed Twin, which is what Marshall did, whereas you split that between two different nodes, and when you have two different separate nodes of capacitance, you can have much more effective filtering than just one node of filtering. And you can use smaller value caps because you don't want the rise time of the bias supply to be slow. You don't want to ever have a condition where you power on the amp and for whatever reason the output tubes are ready to draw current before the bias supply is stabilized. It's not that common to find, but I'll run into amps which have 220 microfarad caps in the bias circuit, and that's just asking for trouble because the larger the cap value, the longer it takes to charge. But if you look at most Fenders, the stock designs from the 60s would have either a 25 microfarad or a 50 microfarad bias cap. That's it. But if you look at the Bassman and look at what Marshall has done with copying that Bassman circuit, they use a 10 microfarad cap, and then that's decoupled from the next additional stage, and that's also a 10 microfarad cap. So they have a total capacitance there of 20 microfarad, but it's very efficient because there's a resistive divider between them, and so they're really decoupling. And I keep banging on this thing. I need to not do that. So in a typical Fender, I'll usually, like the Deluxe Reverb or this Vibrolux, I keep the first stage 47 microfarad, and in this original had two 70s, but now it's 47, and then you can use a 10 or a 22 for the second stage. It doesn't really matter at that point. You're just doing additional filtering. It's separated by the resistance. In this case, it's got like a 3.9 K resistor between the raw bias and the input of that cap. In a standard Deluxe Reverb, you're almost never going to use the pot all the way to the coldest, so there's always going to be some resistance between lugs 2 and 3 of the bias pot. So you have that resistance there. You can take advantage of that and just put a cap from the wiper to ground, in which case you can use a 10 microfarad or 22 microfarad. They're going to be just as effective as each other. I use a 22 because I have a lot of 22 microfarad caps because that's the most common value used in Fenders and a lot of other amps. Let's see. And I may miss things that are said live because I'm trying to get to questions as they were asked. So if you say hello or anything to me live and I haven't seen it yet, please don't be offended. And I appreciate everyone saying nice things to me. Thank you. And I would say nice things right back to you in turn if I had time, but I don't think everyone wants to wait for me to fully greet everyone. Will Schaff, Night Train 15 C1 combo, Weber 12-inch Blue Dog or Celestion Blue Alnico to replace the Celestion Greenback. I don't know. I've never had the Night Train combo. I've only seen the lunchbox versions of that, just the heads to be paired with external cabs. My concern is that most of the night trains are really, really bright, and you may not be happy with either the Blue Dog or the Celestian Blue. They're both very good speakers, and they do sound very similarly. You do have the advantage with a Weber of being able to get the 30-watt version versus the 15, though the Celestian 15 is really closer to 20 watts. But I think the night train in stock form is usually bright enough and kind of harsh so that you may not be pleased with either Alnico Blue variant. See if you can try one, because I think the greenback's a pretty good combination for that amp. The weaknesses of the amp play to the strengths of the speaker, if that makes sense. But try either one. You may think that I'm crazy. Trying to remember when I'm reading these things not to sit here with my mouth open. I watch back these things and I'm like, Hey, Fred St. Felix, what are the mods for the Vox AC-15? Well, there are two sets of mods. They're the ones that I give out and the ones that I do for clients. Because I don't need to give out everything I know. I've shared with some other techs that I respect what I actually do. It's not anything that the average really good tech couldn't figure out. But, I've done an awful lot of work to get some of these things dialed in, and I don't feel the need to let everyone have all that stuff. In the mods that I give out, I say, hey, it won't hurt to bump up the 470 ohm 2-watt screen grids to 1 kilo ohm, 1K 2 watts, and mount them higher off the board. And it won't hurt a thing to, I think it already has 3K grid stoppers on that, so they don't have to do anything there. And there's a resistor, I think it depends on the amp. There's a 330K resistor in series before the volume pot on the normal channel. And I always suggest jumpering that for more gain. That's all you really have to do to make the AC-15C1 sound a lot better. The things I do beyond that is I change the behavior of the tone stack so it's actually the JMI top boost circuit, and it's how the bass pot is wired is different. They do a very modern one, the same circuit that they used in the modern setting on the Custom Classic, and I changed the op-amp mixing circuit to be true unity gain. In stock form, it has a gain factor of 4, so you always get a little bit more dirt hitting the phase inverter than you get with a real one. And I changed the filtering from what's called a ladder setup, where the screen node feeds the phase inverter node, feeds this preamp node, feeds this preamp node. That's a ladder if you look at the whole thing, to what I call a tree branch, which is what JMI did, where you have the screen node and it goes off to the preamp node and goes off to the other preamp node and it goes off to the phase inverter node. But each of those nodes has only got the filtering from the screen ahead of it, doesn't have it. It's not in sequence. So you have a lower filtered amp, which has benefits to Voxes. You can't do that in every circuit because it can be really noisy and sound weird, but that's part of the magic of Voxes. But even in stock form, once you make sure that the output tubes are going to last longer by giving them more screen grid resistance, and unneuter the normal channel by jumping that 330K resistor, it's a really good sounding amp at that point. So the rest of what I do is above and beyond, but even in stock form, that's a really good amp without making any changes at all. Thank you, American Steve. I love this guitar. It is pretty. MBM Carpful. It's got a 74 Pro reverb. The chassis is almost a neon yellow colored tint, but my 74 twin is normal. You've seen me talk about the white dust corrosion on some. Do I ever see yellowish ones? Yeah, some of them go kind of a yellow. Aside from nicotine and heat damage that you'll see around the output tubes, some of them get kind of an orange tint. And I have found that a lot of the time, just putting on a very light application of WD-40, you might have seen me do it in my videos where I'll just put a little bit on the chassis And I just rub around with my finger. You can put on a glove if you prefer. I like the smell of WD-40. I'd put a little bit behind my ear in the morning if I were trying to date myself. And just leave that on there for a little bit and then wipe it up. And a lot of that stuff just comes right off. You don't need to scrub. You don't need to do anything that's going to affect the metal. It just kind of cleans it gently and easily. And if a little comes off, you want more to come off, repeat and let it sit on there 30 minutes instead of 15 minutes. It will do no harm. Hey, Brett, you really do need to depopulate the board to really de-wax these things. And in extreme circumstances, I pull the entire board, have to get the bottom of the board, because the bottom gets those puddles of waxes that can bridge eyelets as well. And I also do the bottom board. But sometimes I can get away with just doing spot treatment of certain problematic areas. And what I'll often do is I will remove the 3 screws that hold the board in place. Now, this is all with the amp off and not plugged in and discharged, so there's no voltages in there. And I will find a way to put paper towels between the 2 boards. So as I heat up the top board, and I can get the wax off once that's really hot, and sometimes I can just lift the components in a small area and get all that wax out of that area and all the old solder off. I'm heating the top of the board so much that it also heats the bottom of the board, and when that board gets hot, all that wax on the bottom will kind of soak into that paper towel, and then I can remove that paper towel. I've been able to do spot treatments like that without depopulating the entire thing. The wax was a terrible idea. It made sense in the short term for them, but in the long term, it's much more problematic to fix than the non-wax boards, which, yeah, they absorb moisture, but it's easy to drive that moisture out. Once that wax is on everything, that wax is dirty, it gets problematic because that wax gets dirty on the bottom where you can't see it, and all those, as you heat up the top, the wax on the bottom melts, and so the eyelets are right next to each other. The wax just melts out in these concentric rings that overlap, and then you have bridges, conductive bridges. Hey, Andrew Schatz. In a previous video, I mentioned a mod to increase headroom on a Princeton reverb reissue. Can I let you know what the mod is? Well, yeah, there are various ways to do it. What I often do, and I've mentioned this in the videos, is I will move the wire that's feeding the plate resistor in the phase inverter from the preamp node to the preceding unused node. In a Princeton, there's an 18K resistor coming from the screen supply, which goes to a coupling cap to ground, and then filter cap to ground. And then there's another 18K resistor, which goes to another filter cap to ground, and all the preamp and the phase inverter is taken from that node. So there's an unused node between those two 18Ks. I will connect the plate resistor to the phase inverter to that node right there. And I will often also move the reverb from the screen node to that node as well, the reverb transformer connection, because it gives more filtering to the reverb, takes away the hum in the reverb, and gives higher headroom to the phase inverter. But when you do it just like that, then the preamp voltage changes to the rest of the amp, so you've got to change the 18K. Sometimes just going to a 12K or 10K for that first dropper puts everything back where you want while you still have the benefit. And I've also been known to change the values of the plate and cathode resistor in the phase inverter, having done that to get the behavior, the load line optimized. But I can't give away all my secrets. Hey, Milo316, another 6G2 clone question. The schematic says the negative bias should be negative 35 volts DC. I get negative 25 volt DC. Is it a big issue? Sorry, negative 28. It can be a very large issue. The lower, it's hard to think about this because negative 28 is not lower than negative 35. But the closer you get to 0 volts DC, the harder it is on your tubes, the hotter they will run. So if you have an amp that the schematic says negative 35 and you get negative 37, nothing's going to get hurt. But if you're at negative 28 or negative 25, things can go wrong. So you really want to see what's going on with your bias supply and get control of that and understand the circuit. You've got most of those Fenders, I think they're taking I think that the 6G2 is deriving the bias voltage from the HT, one of the HT secondaries, not from a dedicated bias tap. I could be wrong on that. Either way, that's going to a resistor and then to a diode, and on the other side of that diode is your raw bias. And if your amp is less negative than you want it to be, say you're at negative 28 volts and you want it to be closer to negative 35, you can increase the value of that resistor. If you've installed a bias trim pot, you can also increase the value of the resistor going to ground from that bias trim pot. There are a lot of ways to do it, but you really need to understand what the variables are. Say in deluxe reverb, where the resistor in question ahead of the diode is a 470 ohm. That's just there to limit current. It's really not affecting the negative voltage very much. Technically, it's forming a divider with everything else in the supply, but that 470 ohm is almost negligible. That's less than the variation between 10K pots. In a Princeton, where you are deriving the bias from the HT, and then it goes to 100K resistor and then to the diode. And so if your Princeton is too hot, say your Princeton, you want to be negative 35 and it's negative 25, and that's as cold as it'll go with that 100K, you can decrease the value of that 100K and then get a colder bias. You could go down to like an 82K. That's how, if you decrease that, you're going to have a higher AC present on the other side of that. Then by the time it gets to the reverse biased diode, then you'll have a lower, as in more negative voltage DC with which to do bias. It's really hard to talk about this without charts and graphs and stuff. Sorry. Is an increase in hum background noise a possible symptom of a failing 12AX7? Yeah, it's very much a possible symptom. Tubes fail in lots of different ways, and sometimes it's faster just to try one than to speculate as to whether it could possibly be that. You got an amp that was working fine and suddenly it's not working fine, roll some preamp tubes. Always have a couple of spare 12AX7s, maybe an AT or AU, depending on your amp. Just for things like that, peace of mind, or hey, it died on a gig. Well, good thing I had a couple of JJ ECC 83s in my bag. Even if I had to use one for the reverb driver, it got me through the gig. Hey, Dryfly1, I don't think 83% dissipation is likely to really hurt anything. Those amps are built really well, but your 6v6s would not have liked it, and your tremolo would certainly not like it, as you discovered. But odds are everything's fine. And if you decrease the total lifespan of your output tubes, maybe you lost a week potential life. Life is fatal. Everything wears out. The center cannot hold. Have fun in the meantime. But yeah, keep your Princeton's bias cooler than people think. Antman58 is wondering why amp builders don't spring for the extra 10 cents for full wave rectification in the bias supply. Cheaper than extra higher capacitance caps, because it's not really necessary. It's just not necessary, and there are other issues as far as where you connect it and how it's connected and all that. But the bias is a really simple thing. It's a very rough thing. You just, if you were to hear it, it's a lousy thing, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So in this case, the perfect could be the enemy of the good, because everything that if you have a circuit that uses 4 parts, and you make a better version of that circuit that's only better on paper, but that requires 16 parts, That's 12 more parts that can potentially fail. You've just dramatically increased the odds of something being less reliable for no benefit in this purpose, in this situation. Um, you know, you know, you could do a full wave, you could regulate it, you could do all kinds of things, but wouldn't be necessary. Hey Matt, to avoid heat, instead of using a single resistor in the B plus line to simulate tube rectifier sag, how do you calculate the values for the separate sag resistors on each side of the HT secondaries? Well, I could tell you a bunch of fancy stuff involving load lines. I could tell you a bunch of fancy stuff involving LT Spice models. The real answer is you figure out, okay, first of all, you look at what other people have done. And you say, okay, well, that company used 100 ohm, that company used 82 ohm, that company used 120 ohm. All right, well, it's probably not going to be any place where a 10K is going to be necessary, and I probably don't want to use anything as low as 22 ohm. But let me try 50 ohm through a 200 ohm. So you order a whole bunch of 5 watt or 10 watts, resistors for 75 cents each if you use the big ceramics, and you just tack solder them in place and say, all right, here's how this responds and feels if I'm using 68 ohm. All right, here's how it responds and feels if I use 82 ohm. Here's how it responds and feels if it's 100 ohm. And you measure down the voltages. The other thing is, the voltage drop that you expect out of it, if you're trying to emulate a rectifier tube. So GZ34, 5AR4, you want a 10 volt drop. 5U4GB, a 30 volt drop. Ooh, if I'm dropping 30 volts, there's going to be more heat. Do I really want to do that? Maybe let's just kind of see how close we can get while things are running sanely, and how does it sound? So it's sometimes faster just to say, hey, this is going to be the safe range. I'm going to just Doc Brown it and see what I like, rather than trying to do all the math. Because a lot of times it takes longer to figure out what the math is actually telling you. And that's going to depend on the individual. Some guys really grok all this stuff, and LT Spice tells them all they need to hear. At the same time, LT Spice models for tubes are not very good. So, but they're great it's great for the power supply stuff. Hey Maurice, I like the 74. The only thing that I don't like about the 74 is how the tremolo switching is done. So, and I found a way to fix that, and I don't remember off the top of my head, so I can't tell you right now the fix for how the tremolo is implemented in the 74. But I like the 74, and the 74 sounds much better, I think, with the proper ceramic disc caps than with film caps. Would a noisy power transformer be something to worry about? Yeah. Power transformers should not be noisy. And if they are noisy, that is a sign that something is failing. Hey, Antman58, appreciate you doing the question a second time with the question marks. Okay, first, I was going to say, hey, Antman, only asked the question once, but I see you're doing with the question marks. I do appreciate that. No, Matt, I got you. It's cool. It wasn't convoluted. My answer probably was. It's hard to extemporize about all these things. Hey, Emmett Otter, how's the jug band going? 61 Brown Vibrolux, newish iron, 60s Jensen C12N, thoughts on circuit? Well, it's a great sounding amp. It doesn't sound anything like later Vibroluxes, like what you start getting in 64 and later. And I love the C12N. I'm not sure the C12N is the right choice for a 61 Vibrolux, but could be a cool sound. I don't know whether it's going to have earlier breakup than the real deal, but not than the real deal. Sorry, than the 60s stuff. But the 60s stuff, and that extends to this 80, has earlier breakup than other 60s and 70s black and silver face models. I mean, this is bridge pickup. This amp is just barely on. the Vibrolux does that thing, even with a telly. And as I mentioned in the video that went live this morning, that's a big part of the Rory Buchanan sound. Is that he was riding an amp that wanted to fall apart because it was so compressed at gig volumes. A little bit brighter with the telly. But I love Vibrolux reverbs. Try that 61 Brown. It's a very different amp than maybe your dream amp, but is not at all indicative from, can't base any opinion based on what the later ones sound like. Have ever had any experience with European boutique tube amps? I've been thinking about picking a secondhand Laboga. I don't know Laboga. The only European boutique amp that comes to mind that I think I could recommend would be Rift amps. Chris at Rift Amps in the UK builds very nice amps inspired by Fenders and Marshalls and such. But I'm not sure. I don't know anyone else like Laboga. I can tell you to avoid Lazy J. I think they're over there. Can I see all the hearts in real time? Only asking because I'm hitting the heart button in rapid speed. I see the hearts in real time on the left. I'm trying to ignore them. No offense, Sonny. It's like I'm watching a birthday party for a kid right now. So if I ask you nicely, if you really heart me, stop hearting me. Hey, Honey Wagon. Where is the magic in building a 583? Is it enough to follow schematic with good parts? Other things to look out for? Well, I think you should start by following the schematic, and more importantly, following Fender's actual layout for everything except how the power is wired. Don't do the ground lift or ground polarity switch, and wire the hot to the fuse and then to the switch, and wire the neutral directly to the other primary, and make sure you have a grounded power cable. And I think it's beneficial to do the full wiring, balanced wiring on the heaters rather than having one side going to ground. You don't need to use the grommets for the preamp tubes because it's very difficult to get to get it wired in such a way that the preamp tube sockets are grommeted, but the shields and the bayonet bases are still at chassis ground. You don't get a ton of benefit from doing that. That's just how they did it back then, but it was much easier at the factory for them to then solder a wire from the tube socket base to the chassis so it would still be grounded. But the sockets that they were using accepted solder, and the stuff on the market today, like the Beltons that are otherwise identical or higher quality replacements than what Fender used, they don't take solder very well, so it's very difficult to do that. Other than that, start off building it just like Fender did, and at that point you can play around with looking at, why is this thing flat down to 3 hertz? And I use it for guitar, and then you can say, where in the circuit could I get rid of all that low frequency flub and optimize it for the range of guitar? So basically what you want to do is you want to say, what is the fundamental of the low E string? That's 82 hertz, 81 hertz. What's an octave below that? 40 hertz. So when you do a negative 3 dB point, no lower, and sorry, 35 hertz or so, 35 to 40 hertz. If you can get your negative 3 dB roll off point somewhere in that area, you're not going to be wasting all your energy trying to amplify the sound of your palm hitting the strings, which generates stuff well below 40 hertz, let alone 81 hertz, 82 hertz. And so all the stages in your amp are trying to amplify that. It takes more power to reproduce those really low frequencies. You're wasting power. So if you say, hey, at the very least, I want this thing flat an octave below 81. And then you can play around with what happens if I set it so it's negative 3 dB down at 80. And then you can say, well, what if I did a Marshall thing and set my negative 3 dB point closer to 200? You can play around with it at that point, and then you get into voicing. But start off building a really good example of what Leo designed. Hey, Ontario Sound. And Drinks and Jams, I'll get back to you, Drinks and Jams. All right, I've got some people here who've not been here before, which is fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us. It means a lot to me. But please note down here in the bottom, question marks before any questions, please, because it makes it easier for me to see. I almost missed these two because they did not. The hum balance on a basement, please tell me my thoughts. They're terrible. First of all, it's a 1/3 watt or 1/4 watt pot. And usually if you have a heater balance circuit in an amp, you're using 2 1/2 watt resistors. So you'd want to replicate that. You'd want to have a 1 watt pot, preferably a 2 watt pot, but at least a 1 watt pot, because the pot's not rated for the current that's present there. And those pots often fail as a result of too much current over time. Second of all, it is really rare for me to find one of those where it is actually really tight to chassis, so the ground really is ground. Third, beyond all that, they're not necessary. Rarely will you have an amp where a balance 100 ohm per side is not more than adequate, more than good enough. Most amps that come in with heater hum, I put in a good artificial heater center tap with 200 ohm resistors, with 1% tolerance, going to the correct part of the chassis for ground, and all the heater hum goes away from imbalance. Sometimes I'll need to install a bias pot. What I do typically is, because that's kind of a fixed thing where you're dealing with the vagaries of the transformer, is I have a 2 watt pot that I use to dial in, hey, this amp does not need to have 1-to-1 ratio, 50-50. It needs to have 60-40, whatever. And then once I find where that amp needs to be, I'll extrapolate from there to say, okay, then I need an 82 ohm and 100 ohm, and that'll give the correct that'll correct the imbalance in the windings of the power transformer. I hope that makes sense. But the pots on basement, the hum balance pot on a basement, if you're talking about the heater balance pot, because other amps have a bias balance pot, which can also introduce hum if the output tube if the output tubes aren't matched. So maybe you're talking about that. Some Fenders have heater balance pots, which are bad. Some Fenders have bias balance pots, which can be good, but they don't let you adjust the overall bias. And when you see the final video on this Vibrolux reverb later this week, at least on the amp itself, I got to get some new speakers. I will have installed an additional trim pot that will give bias balance and overall bias level control. And the bias balance pot in a Fender has no problems with current. It's the heater balance pot that's terrible. Sorry. For any confusion, I was confused myself because it's really hard to remember that what I think of as a hum balance, other players may not think of as a hum balance. I think of hum balance being the heater balance, and I think of output tube balance being a matching pot. Thoughts on players using all the expensive pedals when making sort of generic music? Well, it is something that I've observed. I think an awful lot of people, and I say this nicely, and I'm not singling out anyone with their religious views or anything. I think there's a growing economy of worship band playing, where that's a gig that guitarists can get. all these big churches have worship bands. And there's an entire scene of worship players out there. And it's kind of like, okay, well, you need to have your always on pedals, and you need to have your dotted eights for the Coldplay U2 thing that's always happening, and you need your shimmer reverbs and all this. And it's like, welcome to hell, here's your accordion. Welcome to our church gig, here's your Coldplay rig, all in modeling. And so I see these massive pedal boards the size of my desk with all these sounds and gig rig quartermasters and all these things. And then they play stuff that just kind of sounds like, let's see. All night long. The delay is not up loud enough, but just. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with worship bands or those denominations. And I'm not saying that these are not talented players. But the goal is to be non-obtrusive, to be inoffensive, and to have all these sounds to be basically a mobile soundtrack generator for a movie that no one's going to remember, because the music is designed to be unmemorable. Now, maybe that's a hot take I shouldn't say, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem like anyone's going to say, hey, did you hear that guy over at First Congo? He was just killing it. You're going to be like, hey, the band was nice. But that's one of the only gigs people can get these days that people actually show up and listen to, for however much they listen to. So if anything, I'm frustrated on behalf of these guys who have these gigs. If I were a church going man, I'd find a black Southern tabernacle gospel thing going on, because the gospel scene is just fire. I was talking to my wife last week. I just had my iPod, sorry, how old I am. I was playing my Apple Music through my phone, through my car, on shuffle, and Heaven is 10 Zillion Miles Away by Stevie Wonder came on, and I was listening to that, and I said, man, I wish I was religious and could experience that, because I would want my life to be that expression, because it is just beautiful. That song, the sentiments in it, everything about it, it is just inspiring. That is as close as I get to having the Holy Spirit. And I say that as the son of a Methodist minister who basically lived in churches for 10 years. But my God, Stevie Wonder on that song makes me want to see the light. Where were we? Whoa, 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 whoa. Hey, Michael Fioca, I already answered your question. You got a bad power transformer. Change it out, man. Hey, PWT, trying to resurrect an 80s Ampeg V5 when I touched the solder joint at pin 2 with the probe of my multimeter. Oh my God, the volume of the pop is almost deafening. Could this be a bad socket? Well, I don't know which tube you're touching at pin 2, but it could be that you're measuring pin 2 on the phase inverter, which is going to have like 50 volts present, and so you don't want to touch that with your meter when the amp is on and going through the speaker, because it will sound awful. So you need to know what you're measuring everywhere. Now, if that's a regular preamp tube at pin 2, and again, I don't know the V5, I use the sound of measuring plates. I typically measure plates as far as voltage in an amp to troubleshoot, where I'm like, hey, this amp's losing gain. All right, I got plenty. If I measure the voltage at the PI. I hear it through the amp, the speaker, nice and loud. Then I'll go stage, and then I'm like, hey, I measure this plate is quiet or much lower in volume. It tells me where the problem is. But I don't know the V5 well enough to tell you other than that. It's rarely a bad socket, though, to skip to the chase. Hey, Razvan Hojia? Hey, did amnesia? Like I said last week, look for the videos I've got on the steel string swinger, stinger, whatever, stinger clone that came in. I don't remember what it was called, but it's there. You can just go through. It was about 3 years ago, and I had the thing, and it was a giant thing, and it had that same issue. And I show in that series of videos how to fix it. Maybe later I can find that for you, and I'll put it in the if I remember. I don't want to make easy promises. If I remember after this, I will find that and put a link in the comments on this chat. Thank you. Hey, John, you got a Super Twin. Ooh. Depends on the year. Super Twins are really good amps that most people cannot pick up anymore, and most stages will not let you actually use at any level that you'd want. Now, it probably has a master volume depending on the year, but that also offsets the purpose of having the Super Twin. But they are nice amps if you have a place where you can play it loud enough. If you're a Jerry Garcia freak and you are also playing the Oakland Coliseum, it is probably your perfect amp. Hey, Carlos, he's got a Fender Twin reverb reissue, doesn't have the foot switch. It's any way to turn on the vibrato. The reverb is on already. Thanks. Well, thank you. Well, you can do two things, Carlos. If you don't want to use a foot switch at all, you can have a tech, or you can do it yourself if you're careful. You can rewire the tip contact on the foot switch jack to ground, so it's just always grounded, so the tremolo is always on. On the Fender reissues, there's a TRS stereo jack that takes a stereo plug. Helpfully, the T, the tip, is tremolo, and the R, the ring, is reverb, so it's easy to remember which one is which. The other thing you can do is you can get a stereo plug and wire it so that the tip is connected to ground, but the ring is not connected to ground. Then you just plug it into your extension foot switch jack, and then your reverb is on at all times, and your tremolo is on at all times, and you just use the intensity pot. I've got, this is not a reissue, but I've got a little RCA dummy plug here that tells this thing the foot switch is connected and it's always on. And if I want to hear tremolo, it's right there. So those are the two ways to do it without using a foot switch. If you do use a foot switch, don't order the Fender reissue foot switch. They're garbage. They're so bad. Go to amp parts. What is it called? amprepairparts.com. amprepairparts.com. And I know the guy who runs that. He's a good guy. And he's got a lot of generic replacements for the Fender stuff. Find the one that has modern molded plastic plugs that go to the back of the amp, not the ones with the white wire with the braid, because the white wire and the braid that Fender uses, A, they charge way too much for those foot switches. B, that wire, the white wire, the insulation breaks in chunks and the whole thing becomes worthless. And they're almost impossible to repair. I can repair them, but considering that I charge $40 an hour and a new one's $30, I actually charge more than $40 an hour. That would be my sweetheart deal on a foot switch repair. So. Hey, Matt, thoughts on adding a cut control to an amp with a set global negative feedback? I've read of people doing this to AB763 amps instead of a presence control. What do you hear my opinions? Well, my opinion is that it works just fine. Cut control is totally separate from negative feedback as a concept. A cut control is totally separate from cathode bias versus fixed bias. The only thing you have to remember is that a cut control is not necessary or not of the same amount of benefit if you already have a presence circuit. But an amp that does not have presence, cut can be an easy option. So don't conflate the cut circuit with cathode bias or no negative feedback. But it is a good way if you have an amp that does not have a dedicated presence control to have the functionality of a presence circuit. And remember that you have to have negative feedback to have presence. You don't have to have negative feedback to do cut. Never buy Sprague Adams. They're garbage these days. I've got a set of videos up, I think, called Boring. It's under my tech. I'm pretty sure I put it on my tech tips playlist. It's like 2 or 3 videos, and they're like boring. How to order parts and where I order them from and what my preferences are. So if you want to know the real answer, I've already got about 40 minutes worth of video on that. That's in the tech tips playlist, I'm pretty sure. It's about a year ago, I think. Hey, Fred St. Felix, his modded Princeton reverb reissue makes a humming noise when with all knobs down, does not get louder with volume, and guitar is unplugged. Is that tube failure? It probably is. It probably is unmatched 6V6s. It could be other things. It could be a bad phase inverter tube. It could be a faulty heater supply. You could have a damaged heater balance resistor, especially if the heater secondaries are still connected to the main PCB like they are on most reissues, because they have 200 ohm resistors there. If either one is messed up, you're not going to have a quiet heater supply. So heater supply and output tubes, let's talk about that real fast. In a push-pull amp like a Princeton, you have one 6V6 which does the push, and the other 6V6 does the pull. And if you're looking at it like a sine wave, one is positive, one is negative. They're 180 degrees out of phase with each other, which means if you line them up, they would cancel out totally. But because they have different content as far as the signal goes, they don't cancel out the signal. You just get a positive waveform and a negative waveform. I'm simplifying. But anything which is common to both, and that can be signal or noise, will get canceled out almost totally. So if I am playing guitar, that da-da-da-da-da-da-da does not get canceled out. In fact, you hear it, as you just did. But if I'm playing guitar and there is a heater hum, which should sound more like this, and that heater hum is just being picked up by the heater supply in the output section, because the output section, both the heater supply and the filtering given to from the reservoir cap, it's not a lot of filtering there. There can be ripple on the AC, which is noisy, and you can have heater issues because the lead dress of the heater supply by the output tube is usually not great. All that stuff gets picked up by each tube. But because that's common to each tube and it's 180 degrees out of phase, it gets canceled. We don't hear that hum. We don't hear that ripple. But if one of the tubes is imbalanced, if one of them is not conducting as much as the other, then they don't get full cancellation. So instead of being this, push and pull, you may get push and pull. Therefore, you still hear the ripple and the heater hum in the output section. Does that make sense? So yeah. Could be 6V6s, but it could be a few other things. Hey, sent to me. Good to see you. Good to be seen. What resistors, when replaced, should have a carbon film rather than a metal oxide to keep it closer to vintage tone? Well, it depends on the amp and what the vintage is. And whether it was vintage or just old, some amps are vintage, some amps are just old. And if someone's selling an amp, it's all magically vintage. But you know, I'm a bit of a I'm a bit particular on that. If the amp originally had carbon films, it should have carbon films, not metal oxides. Uh, but at the same time, there are places where you won't hear any difference between the two. There are places where you will. This is too broad a question. But in general, amps that had carbon comps, and if you cannot get the carbon comps or you don't want to use the carbon comps, you should use carbon films. Beyond that, the next step would be metal films here and there. Metal oxides anywhere in the audio path is probably a mistake. It's fine to use metal oxides in the power supply, but not anything that the signal goes through. But you can, and you may like it. It'll just be a different feel and sound. And it's not like you change one resistor and the entire amp changes. It's a very cumulative effect. So, how do I decide when to sell a guitar and let it go? The last guitar that I sold was a Les Paul, and I sold that Les Paul because I had the opportunity to get this 335, and I knew that I needed to give the seller a pretty big chunk as a down payment so he could let me pay off the rest over the month or two. And so I had two guitars that were up in the air, the SG and the Les Paul, both of which I knew I could get enough for pretty quickly to be able to get that 335. And I've discussed this before, but it really came down to the 330, the Les Paul and the SG both played great. They both sounded great. They both looked cool. They both did similar things. But I could sit here with the SG in my lap like this, just like the Telly. It would just stay here. Whereas if the Les Paul's in my lap constantly, always wanted to fall down. Just not a comfortable thing to have in your lap. So that's how I decided to sell that guitar. And I put a video up showing everyone on the channel that I had a guitar for sale and what it was, and someone bought it and they got a good guitar and assurance that, hey, if they bought a bad guitar, they could tell the world that, hey, Sonic Audio sells bad guitars. So I had no incentive to sell a bad guitar. He was a young player. It was his first good guitar, and I felt good knowing that he was getting a really, really good first good guitar. Appreciate that sent to me. Thank you very much. We are coming up on the first intermission. For those of you just joining us, I do a 3-hour chat on Saturdays. And at the top of each hour, I do a 7-minute intermission. So everyone can go get a sandwich, get something in the fridge, do whatever you need to do so you're not missing anything in the middle of a 3-hour stream. And I have decided that I'm going to run ads only during the intermissions. There's not going to be one of those channels where every 3 minutes there's a goddamn ad. I hate ads. But I need to make more money off this. That's just being frank. So when I put on the intermission screen and I go get another cup of coffee or whatever, I'm going to put on an ad. Those of you with premium or ad blockers won't see it. Some of you won't get an ad regardless, because it seems to be random who gets one, who doesn't. And some of you will get one. Hopefully it's one of those skipping 4, 3, 2, 1 things. But it's going to be a 7-minute intermission. You're going to see a blank screen with a countdown of 7 minutes. And there's going to be an ad coming up. And you can skip it or you can watch it. You go get a sandwich, take a leak, whatever you need to do. So YouTube will give me more money because I'll have ads. None of you are under any obligations to watch them. But please, even if you just mute it and come back, don't leave. More good stuff coming up. And let's try that now. On the break, I was looking at people's comments about the ads, and I understand. I don't like ads. And at the beginning of this channel, once I hit 1,000 subscribers, I promised that I would not be one of those channels that just like ad here, ad here, ad here, because I hate those videos. You know, I can look at it, and on the chapters, like every 3 minutes, there's an ad. Screw away, screw that. But I'm doing 3 hours on this thing. I'm not putting any information out during those intermissions. Helps make a little bit more money off these things. And you know, a lot of these channels that do things like this, in order to get your question answered, you have to do a super chat. And I don't do that. I do appreciate the super chats sent to me. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. I appreciate that. But it is not a condition of getting your question answered. So I don't have any sponsors, working player. I don't seek out any endorsements or sponsorships. I don't want any. It gives me the freedom to say what I actually think and to be honest about these things, which I think is becoming a diminishing quality on a lot of guitar YouTube. At the same time, I put these things up here where, you know, I get the little messages like this. And I know, because I see all the stats, that about 10%, 15% of people watching these things actually bother to hit the like. If you were to like this, you know, I'm not begging. I don't give a fuck about that. But if you like this, that really does help the channel because it means other people would find out about it. If you like a video, if you share the video, more people find out about it, the whole thing prospers. You know, a rising tide sinks all ships, something like that. And I hate talking about that stuff. So usually I just put it in the little graphic, you know, every video at the 30-second mark. There's a little please like and subscribe. And I don't go on and on about it. And I don't ever say smash the like button or blah, blah, blah. That's boring. But, you know, it is a thing. If I were to scratch build a Vibrolux, what changes would I make? Adding a master, changing the voicing of the normal channel for those of us that wouldn't use. The only thing I would change on the Vibrolux is I would change the normal channel to the super reverb voicing, which is just changing the 47 nanofarad mids cap to a 22 nanofarad mids cap. And maybe for some players a master volume, but I think a lot of the important thing of the Vibrolux is how the output transformer behaves when it's pushed. And you know, I'm playing kind of quietly in the room here. If that's too loud, I've got a Tonex and an HX Stomp, and I've got headphones. So I think if the 28 watt amp is too loud, use a different amp or don't use an amp at all. You know. No, I got you, Amp Man. That's cool. Yeah. The questions that you may delete in the actual YouTube stream, I still see here in the app that I'm using. It's complicated. Someday I'll do a stream where I just show everything that all the information I've got coming at me at once, and you'll all feel sorry for me and want to give me your money. I hope you guys know that I'm always this close to making fun of myself just because it's the surest way to punch down. I mean, punch up. I don't ever want to punch down, so I'm always a safe punching bag. Does it help to put an external fan on a tube amp? My Ampeg seems to run very hot. It helps if you want to have a whole bunch of dust inside all your stuff, because you will get dust in the fan, you will get dust in all the tube sockets, you'll be any opening in the chassis, you'll have dust in the chassis. And a well-designed amp is fine getting hot. Tubes run very hot. Tubes are designed to get very hot. You can get an amp like, say, a divided by 13, where the 6 EL34s are mounted way too close to each other, with the plates all on the same line, so the plates aren't staggered. And then that's a bad situation. You want to have a design so that, hey, these things that get hot, they need to be at least 2 inches from each other. And the plates don't need to line up because that makes it worse. So you just turn them all at a 45-degree angle so the plates aren't facing each other. There are things that the amp designer should take care of, but this thing's been on for 3 hours today. If I were to take off these tube shields, the 12AX7s are warm. The 12AT7s are hot. The rectifier tube or the 6L6s would burn the flesh off my bones. And if I can reach it, I can leave my fingers on the power transformer for, that was what, 4 or 5 seconds. It was uncomfortable, but I was not being burned. Like really, really hot bath water that you can't get in it yet, but I know that I would not be scalded. And that's how that amp was designed to run. And a fan might slightly cool off the tubes, but not too much. But it certainly would put dust in everything. Now, if you have some amps where you have a poor cabinet enclosure and there's just not any air reaching the tubes, like old AC-30s, those vents are this big. They're way too small. They should be larger. But a fan is not the right solution for that as far as mounted inside the amp. What you do with those things is you perforate holes in the bottom slider and you put an amp behind the thing. So more air is pushed into the back, which then works its way up. But it's tricky. In general, fans and amps seem to do more harm than good. What things would keep me from buying a vintage amp at a good deal? Meaning when things are so unfixable, costly, that it makes sense to spend more on a better vintage unit. Well, number one, are the transformers original? That's not a deal breaker if they're not, but it certainly affects the price. If they are not original, are they good quality and professionally installed? Second of all, has it ever had any catastrophic failures? You know, I see my share of amps come in with charred wires, like the secondary shorted, and all the insulation on the secondaries to the heaters are gone, or the socket's got charring on it, or there's leakage in the filter caps and there's actually been fire or arcing. These are things that I would really worry about, because it means that the repair bill to get that thing playable is going to go from about $200 to about $500. Then you have to look at, the speakers. The owner of this 80 Vibrolux got a good deal on this amp, but the speakers need to be replaced. So let's look at two 10-inch speakers. You're looking at least $75 each, so that's $150 minimum for a new pair of speakers and to install them. It adds up, but when this amp's done and it's had quite a bit of work done inside to bring it to where it should be, and it still has a little bit of dehissing left to go, for what they have in it, it will sound as good and be as reliable as, say, a 65 or 64 Vibrolux reverb. That would cost $2,000 to $4,000 more, depending on the market. So there are judgment calls you have to make. And then there are other things that, like, I don't care how good that 1960, what condition that 65 Gibson is in. That 65 Gibson never sounded good. It's not a vintage amp. It's just an old amp. Whereas that 1960 Gibson, say a G18T, that's a vintage amp. That's a particularly good model from a particularly good year. That's the thing to seek out, and then you just go through the laundry list of how original is it and what condition is it in. It's tough, especially when most of the apps on Reverb and eBay and all that, and music store listings just show the outside. They don't even show the inside, and no one's necessarily even qualified to tell you about the insides on the seller's end of things. Hey, Carlos, where in Portugal are you? I had a wonderful time in Lisbon, and we want to get back at some point. And I know that Lisbon is not all of Portugal, especially if you're in Porto. but we had just a wonderful time, and we think about it all the time. I don't think that you should get into buying and rebuilding vintage amps unless you already know all the things that an experienced tech knows. It's, I have a 64 or 65 super reverb over there that I got for $200 because a player brought it into the shop and it was just horrible, all rusted out. And I gave him $200 for it, expecting to restore it. And I could do the whole thing. I have not had the time. So I don't know whether I'm going to find the time or cannibalize it for parts if a client has got the same year super reverb and say the power transformer needs to be replaced. Well, for the right price, I got one. I'll see. But, I've got $200 into it. So, and I have not found the time. But for most people that amp in that condition, you get it for $200, you'd be looking at $1,200 bill to make it playable. That's kind of an extreme. Hey, Federico. Do I like Gretsch guitars? Someone's been watching 5 Watt World today. Can you see that? Keith was really kind and sent me one of his 5 Watt World blue chips, which I've been using all this time. And I'll talk about that at some other point. But I thank you, Keith. Thank you. It was very kind. I feel like a real YouTuber now. Anyway, I was watching that this morning because I was talking to Keith about that subject last week, because Gretsch is a big concept. I like Gretsch guitars in theory more than in reality, because in reality the binding's usually coming off in chunks and the neck's not attached well. And they always have weird little things about them that make them a difficult proposition. But I would like to have a really good example of a country gent, maybe, and do all the wrong position stuff on it, because that's part of my world. But also know, having worked at vintage guitar shops and hung around in guitar stores, that Gretsches are very problematic. And I have actually played Brian Setzer's Hot Rod Gretsch, the one that was on the cover of Guitar Player. And that thing was a dog. He sounded great playing it, but it was a wretched actual instrument. Thank you, Mr. Working Player 53. That's a Musicraft neck and body that I slapped together a while back because I wanted a Nacho caster, but I did not have a spare $7,000 laying around anywhere. And I was unhappy with the Fender reissue series because they always go weird orange. Some of them are better than others, and I just wanted something that made me happy, and I think I've gotten there. Hey, Jonathan Kim. I would tend to avoid the Rose Morris era. Starting with the Korg era, they started getting a lot better, much better, though the Made in UK TBX has got major problems. Then the Custom Classic can be made to be good, but an odd design in some ways. Gringrod did some strange things in that. Maybe it was demands from on high. The hand wired is pretty good, but stiff, not quite an AC30 in sound, though it's close in other ways. Can be made to be an AC30. I'm really impressed with the AC30 Custom series, the C series. I have not tried the S series, and I have not tried the new hand wired. I've tried some of the old hand wired limited editions, the ones which have the reverb. Those were good amps being killed by a terrible implementation of a reverb circuit, but that's easily undone. I think people hear and buy with their eyes when it comes to a lot of these things, and a lot of the things sold as Voxes were kind of terrible. The TBX is the Vox circuit built horribly in terms of the board layout. The PCB design on that thing, it would not pass a freshman electronics class. It has built-in ground loops. And they knew about it, and they tried to fix it, and they made it worse. And every tech who looks at that thing, who knows what they're talking about, goes, this went into production. This wasn't caught in the prototyping stage. Because, you know, if, say, Brad, he's not here this morning, so I can talk about him. If Brad were to do a PCB amp and go out on the market and had a built-in ground loop that made the amp go bzzz at all times, people say, who is this clown? And they go out of business in 6 months. But if it says Vox or Marshall or Fender on it, and you have all the cosmetics right, people say, oh, that's part of the vintage sound, man. And AC-30s aren't noisy. It's one of the problems I have with some of the Tonex models I've purchased for AC-30s, because apparently they were doing accurate captures of poorly maintained AC-30s that have a terrible sound and are very, very noisy and hissy, which is not what an AC-30 is, not one worth capturing at least. Yeah, a lot of the rack gear is tough because you have, say, here's your power amp and here's your preamp. Well, depending on if the manufacturer, if the input of the preamp is here and the power transformer, the power amp is here, you may be okay. But if you have an amp where here's the input of your preamp and here's the power transformer of your power amp, that's a problem. Good friend and client up in Brooklyn has a basement full of wonderful vintage amps, and he called me and said, hey man, this amp sounds so great by itself, and this amp sounds so great by itself, but I try to use them together, and they're noisy, and they're not touching, and they're not even, one of them's not even plugged in at the same time, just powered on. What's going on? And I said, okay. All right, well, this amp has got the input on the left, and that amp's got the power transformer on the right. So flip them around so that one's, so one has the input on the left, one has the power transformer on the left. You need to set it so that instead of having the input of this amp next to the power transformer of this amp, flip them. So the input of this amp is here, input of this amp is here, and just the power transformers are close to each other. And all those problems went away just because of the layout of the amps physically in the space. And that can get much worse in a rack setup. Turn off reactions. Let's see. Groovy. Thank you very much. I am now reactionless, at least for the duration of this chat. I have to remember to do that next time. Thank you. Is the Princeton my favorite home practice amp? Also simple option, Engel or Mesa or Friedman for high gain. Two very easy questions. My favorite practice amp is the one that I have that I've been working on that's playable, that sounds good at low volume. So right now, it is this 1980 Vibrolux, just barely on, Vibrolux reverb. In last week's stream, my favorite home practice amp was a 65 Deluxe reverb, just barely on. There's a little bit less output than this. And other times it has been Princeton's. I don't actually own any amps, but I think for most people, if they want to have an amp to have at home, I would recommend a Princeton. And I would not mind having one myself at some point, but I don't need one. As far as the high gain stuff, Friedman, Ingles and Mesas are made horribly, and they're noisy, and the Friedman's fantastic. Now, if you want to get into Friedman versus Sir, or Friedman versus Metropolis, or Friedman versus Head First, I have no answer, because all those companies make great amps, and I'm friends with all their makers, and I respect all of them. And there's not a better there. There's which one speaks to you. The same way, which Friedman. You may play 5 different models, and one of them is just clearly the winner. But any Friedman is going to be better than any Engel or any Mesa. Same for Sir, same for Metropolis, etc. but I'd probably make my own. Shh, don't tell anyone. Well, they're appalling. So yeah, we were appalled, and our heads were were being scratched because our brains itched from all the stupidity on display. Let's see. Well, an eight string, yeah, in a bass, just everything I said about the high pass content for guitars, depending on the bass, so 40 hertz is fundamental for a four string, and you got to go down to what, 30 something, 20. You got to be like 20 hertz and above for a five string. Though most people never hit the fundamental of a five string's B. You're hearing the octave up. You're hearing the harmonic content of that, and our ear substitutes the missing fundamental, which is really fascinating when you think about it. Most speakers cannot reproduce that B, and yet we hear that B because we have all the sonic cues that B occurred. Therefore, our brains heard that B. It's interesting. In terms of we already have the term ghost note taken, especially for bass playing, but that's another form of the ghost note. Never had a JMP one. What makes them so desirable to use? Well, that's the sound of a lot of live Def Leppard and a lot of live ZZ Top. It was just a very reliable, easy way to get the sounds on their records. Much better sound in person than a Rockman, though they both use those as well. But And Jonathan Kim, sending my question again. I answered it already. I don't. Maybe. Oh, I see. You didn't have the question marks. Okay, gotcha. Okay, that's the thing where I'm working against myself. Where I say, "Hey, please put the question marks, but please only ask a question once." So people will ask a question, then they'll go back and add the question marks, and I see it twice. So I'm making them break my own preferences. But together, we'll get all this worked out. I'm still relatively new to this. Capable, hardworking Jay. Yeah, there was a Rose Morris period before the Korg era, made by Marshall, working player. Hey Arnold, I've got some videos up on my channel about post-phase inverters and the Larmars. I've shown them installed on Marshalls, on Fenders, on Voxes. I'm a big proponent of the Larmar PPI MV because it works and it's useful to a player. And when it's on 10, it's out of the circuit, and there's a very low parts count and very little to go wrong. So it's just a win-win-win-win-win kind of thing. And the only way to sound better is when you get into reactive loads and IRs and stuff. Matt, you've been watching too many of my videos, man. Sorry. The Lord moves in major keys. Thank you for paying attention, people. Yeah, I understand, the worship thing and modern stage volumes. I'm not saying that you need to be rocking Hard Rock Marshall, but if you do, make sure you're wearing dragon pants. But there is a homogeneity that's happening in a lot of these contexts. Let's see. Trying to get to the next question. I really need to have someone sitting here and doing this part for me, so you guys don't see me squinting at the screen. So they just pop up on my screen, and I'm like, hey, and John asked, blah 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 blah. Yeah, all right, PWT. Yeah, phase inverter tube. If you measure the grid on the phase inverter tube, you will get very loud pops. That is normal. That is nothing to worry about because there's DC voltage there. And the pop from that is not decoupled from everything else. You can measure the DC voltage present on the plates, and you're not going to hear that horrible sound because it has a coupling cap after it that takes a lot of that stuff out of what you hear. But when you measure the grid of a phase inverter, a long tail pair like that, welcome to my world. Oops, didn't mean to do that. That's how you learn. Hey, if I want to make a horrible noise, to do this. A lot of times when I'm measuring leaky DC on the reverb channel, I'll pull V4 on a Fender AB763 variant, so that I don't have to, when I'm measuring the awful DC present at grids and stuff, I don't have to hear it. I apologize about the character limit. This is a flawed medium, but it's what we got. And I know that someone was asking earlier, I think it was Wes. No, I have no input into what ads are showing you guys. I wish I did. I have a feeling, given the demographic of people who watch my videos, it's probably a lot of ED and reverse mortgage ads, but hopefully I'm wrong. Hey, Carl Carlson, avoid the Supersonic 22, avoid the Supersonic 60, avoid any other of the Supersonics they may have come out with. Terrible amps, the same idiotic low voltage supply that they used in the Evil Twin, the 94 Twin, and the Blues and Hot Rod Deluxes and DeVilles. Just a really idiotic way to do it. The same bad IC brand filter caps. And the Supersonics have got a really horribly implemented effects loop and line out staging, and the reverb is noisy. It's just, there's so many better amps. For the same price, you can get a deluxe reverb reissue and actually sound good. Even if there was no quality noise issues with the Supersonic, the premise is that here's your Bassman channel and here's your deluxe or Vibroverb channel. But to make one sound good, you have to have very different EQ settings than the other one. So it's not a matter of pushing a button. It's a matter of pushing a button and messing with all the knobs, and then pushing a button and messing with all the knobs, which can be done. Obviously, we have grease pencils for reasons. Sorry, my eyes are really irritated. Must be something in the weather. But for live use, you can't really go between the two without sounding like ass on one of those settings. Hey, Fred. If you're in America, I quite like Tube Depot and the Tube Store. Now, the Tube Store is in Canada. I'm not sure what the current state of shipping to and from Canada is. That may no longer be a great option, or temporarily may not be a great option for us to get from the Tube Store. But I've quite enjoyed using Tube Depot. For AC-15 C1, odds are just a full set of JJs will make you happy. And if you get from a good vendor like Tube Depot, you can have them match the output tubes, and you can have them sort for low noise and microphonics. And that's a good choice. You can also get great results for V1 and V3 in the AC-15 C1 with the Electro-Harmonix 7025. But not the 12X7, the 7025. But for V2, which is a cathode follower stage, which has got about 200 volts on the cathode, you want to use either a Chinese or a Slovakian tube. So either a Chinese tube like the TADs or the JJ. Might as well just go with the JJ. It costs less, does the same thing. For the Princeton reverb reissue, for all the 7025s, I like the Electro-Harmonic 7025s. I don't think it has an AT in that. It has an AT7 for the driver for the reverb. So for that AT7, I like the Joint Army Navy Philips 70s new old stock 12 AT7s that Tube Depot has. If that's more expensive than you want to spend, you can get the Electro-Harmonix 12 AT7 or the JJ 12 AT7. It's called an ECC 81. I always forget the 1 and the 2. But it's only like $10 more for the Joint Army Navy. For the output tubes on a Princeton, I like the Electro-Harmonic 636s, and for the rectifier tube, I like the JJ 504/GZ34. I feel like I'm just mumbling too much. What pickups did I settle on for my Tele? I got those Murrays, and I was quite happy with them. I did have the advantage of being able to talk to Ben Murray about that and give him some specific requests for the neck pickup. As you might have heard, it has a lot of low end without being dark, which is a rarity for Tele neck pickups. And I've got his broadcaster bridge. I tried his broadcaster and his 53, and I like the broadcaster. So I'm quite happy with those. I don't like the four-way switch in a Tele. It just gives one added complication, and I don't think the series sound is that cool. That means a lot to me that you're watching all the way from Portugal. It amazes me that people are watching from Denmark and Portugal and all over the world. Little old me in my little old room in little old Memphis. So, obrigado. Is there an amp like a solid-state rectified J245 and 1x12 combo? Well, if there's not, RJ, I know someone who can make one. Yeah. I'm not quite sure. And I mean, Marshall had some solid-state, like the Black Flag 50s and stuff. But I'm not sure if anyone in a production sense is making that, but it'd be very possible to do that. Maybe I bet Dr. Z's got something along those lines. They may have a tube rectifier, but that's easily changed. That's just a couple of 1 in 4,007s and holding your mouth just right and then tweaking the bias. There you go. The old Dr. Z Route 66 wasn't too far from that. Oh, you got a Supersonic 60. Just sell it to some other poor schmuck and get a better amp. AC-15 custom, not the CC1. You have the CC1? All right, well, if you got to change out the RCA and reverb cables, just go to Walgreens and get whatever they sell for stereo. It's fine. It's the same quality as a solid state. Sell the solids, sell your Supersonic and sell your CC, and get either a deluxe reverb reissue or the AC-15C one, and be very happy. What would I say to a kid who plays country top 40 on a Fender Tele, graduates high school, moves to Nashville to search for stardom like a band like the Rolling Stones? Well, good luck, because half the people, it's like everyone in LA is working on their screenplay. If you were to move to Nashville to be a hot shit guitarist, the kid who takes your order at the Sonic is probably a better guitarist than you, and he can't get a gig. It's a really, really competitive scene. And the bar is just staggeringly high. Basically, the only way to do that reliably would to make it already outside of Nashville and then move there like Dan Huff or something. If I had a recipe for how to be a successful musician, I wouldn't share it with you. I'd be too busy being out there being a very successful musician. But everyone, I know a lot of guys in Nashville, and there are some amazing players who are not on the A team. And it's not because they're not great players or not great people. It's just that there are only so many slots on the A team. And, and plus the whole scene is changing. So, but if you're really good, go down there and play and play and play and play. And if you're really good, someone will hear you eventually, and someone will recommend you to take a road gig with someone who's just coming out, and maybe the stars will align. Hey, Tombs Clawtooth. I have no experience with a PV Penta, sorry. I do not have any relation to James Earl Jones, but I have seen him in movies. And last night, I heard him in a movie. What's Sir's closest offering to a Vox AC? I imagine it'd be the Badger. The Badger, I think it's got a 15 and a 30. Now it's not a Vox amp, but it is cathode biased EL84s, and it's Vox adjacent. And the Badger's a really nice amp. Well, thank you, but no, I will not take anyone's shipped supersonic because it would be a waste of their money. There are amps that are worth fixing, there are amps that are not, and I would choose not to. What is my all-time favorite Tele pickup? I used to have one. It was a Rewound 67 that was really nice sounding, but that's the rose-tinted glasses of memory. I don't know about that because the great Tele pickups I've tried have been in great Teles, and it's hard to say what's the pickup, what's the guitar. With my own guitar, I've tried a bunch of different things, and I went noiseless for a while. I had the Area T's from DiMarzio, and they always had a plasticky thing to them. And then I tried the Quiet Coils from Mojo Tone. They had a different kind of plasticky thing to them. And I quite liked the Quiet Coil 67s in one of my Strats, but I didn't like the ones in the Tele. And I was gonna get some others, and Ben Murray, I got in touch with Ben Murray through some mutual friends in Australia. I was very pleased with these, and I think that they sound good. And for that Tele, at least for now, I'm quite happy with it. And I've played one of the nicest neck pickups I've tried, though I like this one better in this guitar, is the Julian Lage neck pickup that always gonna kill me. Really great pickups, and really nice guy. Ron Ellis, and I've spoken to him many times. Tele came in not long ago with a Ron Ellis Julian Lage neck pickup, and it just sounded glorious. But for what I need from my Tele, I like this one better. But man, the Julian Lage Ron Ellis just sounded great. Lawler makes fantastic pickups. I think if you have a really great Tele, then you just be somewhere along the spectrum of great with any of those pickups. But it's like choosing the right flavor of vanilla. One person's perfect as another person's, it's okay. It's hard to say. Any chance of finding one of my custom overdrive pedals? I might have a few more hitting of the last ones coming out at some point this year, and I'll let you guys know, but they would be the last ones. All right, so we are now coming up almost to the second intermission, and we're just now to the chat from the first intermission. So let me see what I've missed. Hey, Bill Avonda. No, it's fine for that he eliminated the death cap. It protects you as long as he did the rest of the wiring correctly. I'm gonna try to get more caught up so that we can get through the questions. And if I missed your question, if it doesn't have question marks in front of it, then you know why I missed it. What I think of Mesas, other than their pedals and cabs, other than the amps, like the pedals and cabs, well, the pedals, some are okay, some are nasty. Like the big chrome one with all the buttons and tubes in it was hokey and noisy. The cabs are good, but very, very heavy. And I had a slant cab with V30s in it with a leather covering, and I thought it was just the tits until I tried to gig with it, and all the leather corners would peel up. It just doesn't hold up to real world. That one didn't hold up to real world usage, but it was gorgeous until it wasn't. It sounded good, but a lot of cabs sound good, and I think for the money, there are better cabs to get. I would point you to Mojo Tone to get a good quality cab at a much better price. Probably a better quality cab with a lot more options. I have seen people discussing the Peacekeeper in videos. I've not tried one, and it seems like it might have some heat issues over prolonged usage, which they seem to point out, but I've not had an opportunity to try one, so I don't have any opinion other than it doesn't seem like something I'd be interested in. You're picking up an older 2-notes Capture X. You don't have an external cabinet. Plan on unplugging the factory lead between the speaker. Yeah, that's fine. Just disconnect the speakers and just plug the Capture into one of the output jacks on your AC-15C1. You'll be fine. I don't recall on the AC-15C1. I don't think so, but some boxes say external, some say extension. You just want to make sure it's one of the ones that you still have signal, because there's internal, external, and extension, and they serve different roles. So make sure you're going to be getting signal there. I think you'll be okay on using the one that says external, but disconnect the internal one to make sure. And you should be just fine. Then running a twisted or speaker lead with a TS plug to the external speaker jack and spades to the speaker. Oh, I see. You got the speakers connected to the board and in the. Well, you don't need to do that with AC-15C1. I believe it's got an external and extension. Oh, I see. You don't want to hear the speaker unless it's at the level that the Capture sets up. This is what I think I saw Wes responding to earlier. I would want to spend more. I would want to spend more time with your question to know what you're really asking. I think that Wes addressed it already, John. But in terms of your third part, what I would do in those situations is I'll put like a 330 ohm 10 watt resistor across the output jacks in an amp where the output is not shunted to ground when nothing's plugged in. That way, it would be in parallel with the 8 or 16 or whatever load of your speaker. 330 ohm in parallel with 15 or 8 is really not going to affect the loading when the speaker is connected. Won't really change the behavior, but it'll protect the amp from having a no load condition. So, and it's not a dummy load. Don't try to use it with nothing plugged in. It's just to protect you for short durations if you were to forget, or if the speaker came unplugged. So a 330 ohm would be better than a 16 ohm, because you put a 16 ohm in there, it'd be in parallel with everything you're doing, and it would mess up the purpose of a reactive load. But the best option is not to have any resistor in parallel, just to make sure that it's always connected. But without spending too much time on this, you want to make sure that you have a very solid connection from the amp to its primary load, which in this case would be the two notes, and then from there, I assume after attenuation, to your speakers. I've got one to show you. Just a second. I always have a bunch of these, which I don't always drop, but I almost did. It's a female to female 1/4-inch adapter sold by Switchcraft. It's like $15. So one end goes to the speaker plug of a cabinet, You have what would normally go to the back of the amp, the other goes to speaker cable. So you can put this in line, and you could just, set up your AC-15 so the connection going to the internal speakers would actually go to a male-ended switchcraft speaker plug, or it could be Neutrik, Amphenol, whatever you want, and then a female jack added, because they sell versions of this which just has a female thing where the wires come out together, going to the speaker, and when you're just using the amp by itself, you plug the speakers into the jack, and so it's just internal, and then you disconnect that and run out to the 2 notes, and then from the 2 notes back to this for other usage. That'd probably do what you need it to do elegantly, probably for about $30 worth of parts. Hey, Daniel James, Bella's a great amp. Let's see. And you could also just use the external connection and then connect to your speakers, yeah. Hey, Chris R. Got an EF86 Tubetown AC build on the go. It's a head, but would a combo be too risky with it? EF86s and combos are very tricky because all that vibration is not your friend with an EF86. It can be done, but you would definitely want to mount that socket on grommets, and you would definitely want to also find a way to make sure the tube base and the tube shield are tied to chassis ground, despite the fact that the grommet's there, which will further dampen noise and vibrations. It's really tricky, but you can do it. But there's a reason a lot of EF86 amps today are heads, not combos. Let's see. Now we're to where we got back from the last one. Causes of low volume output. Recapped and replaced resistors as needed. New sets of matching 6550s. Voltages on pins 3, 4, and 5. And bias readings all within spec and very well balanced. Help. You said that was a V5. I am unfamiliar with the V5. So I cannot tell you from experience what's going on. So if all the voltages on all the pins of all the tubes are within the spec, and all your bias readings are good, and the amp's not going to have an effects loop, you probably have a bad tube somewhere. And if you have an amp which has an effects loop, even if it's just an awful passive insert one, you can plug a guitar into the effects return and see if you hear anything, at least. If you then you can get a sense for what's normal. Or you can run the preamp out into something else, and you can say, oh, the problem's in the output section. It could be a lot of things, though. Without having your amp in front of me, I don't want to send you down one path if it's something else. It could be something as simple as you're plugging in the wrong output jack, or the output jack is being shorted out. Therefore, you're not hearing what the amp is actually doing, and so you're cranking the amp up and barely hearing anything. I'd have to have your amp in front of me unless you have much more specific information, PWT. I'm sorry. I'm really not trying to dodge a bullet. Well, I am. I'm trying to dodge a bullet for your sake. I'm not trying to avoid your question because I don't want to be wrong or something. I'm wrong all the time. I'm fine with that. That ship sailed a long time ago. But that question is too open-ended for me to give you useful advice. Sorry. What sort of amp dimensions do I prefer? Princeton's can be boxy. Deluxe reverbs can be boxy. I think the Pro and Super and Twin have the better dimensions. And AC30s have good dimensions for a 2x12. 1x12, I think they need to be larger than you get with a Deluxe reverb. I'd want to see basically a Vibrolux reverb cabinet with a 1x12 to be the ideal or more ideal 1x12 in a combo. And then you get into separate cabs, you can have a lot more variables. Hey, Tim Gaines, thank you very much. If I ever hear a loud noise from the porch's in-house, take a listen. Are you just on the road, Tim? Oh, we need to get together sometime from the porch's in-house. I thought you were talking about Zen Drive for a second. I was like, yeah, I'm not too happy with this one, but. And I've got to stop doing. I don't know where that habit came from, but John Mayer got this by the same ass bug. Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I love this thing. I've got the maple EJ over there. This thing's never too lonely. I always forget which way to go in this thing. But this thing's just pretty. And, it's not specs I would have chosen, not a color I would have chosen, but it's just too good. It's just too good. We're almost up to the second intermission just as now as I've gotten to where people are talking about things in the first intermission, which means I missed an entire hour's worth of stuff. I have to play around, do a lot of catch up. Let's see. When we get to where the next question is, then we'll take it. We'll get to Did Amnesia's question about warming amps up when we get back. But we're going to take another 7-minute intermission. And to those of you who get one, enjoy the ad. All right, now where were we? Why do tube amps sound so much better after completely warming up after an hour? Because they do. Because things reach a stable operating condition, and everything, all the things are going to expand at different rates as they heat up, have expanded and are constant, and the voltages are all going to be more stable, and just what the amp sounds like at that point. It's just one of those things. There's a certain amount of electricity which is converted to heat in this process, and it's a matter of efficiencies and finding its stable operating point. How are we to separate the brand history identity from the current brand identity? It's tricky. My advice is you don't want to support. Well, it's easier now that a certain someone's no longer at Gibson Henry J. But if you're not a fan of how a company works, but you like the product, there is a world of used Strats and used Les Pauls and such out there where you can get one of those guitars used, and whoever owned it gets some money, but whoever made it, whoever markets it, does not. I would love to visit Denmark, Ken. I would love to do that. Maybe some summer I will make it up there. Let's see. Next question. Yeah, some of the more recent Japanese Gretsches are much better guitars than some of the 60s ones are now. Though a lot of the cheaper stuff that Gretsch has now, I think are they owned by Fender again? A lot of electromatic stuff, the really cheap Asian import stuff. I don't mean to sound a little cheap Asian imports, but some of them are just really shoddy. It's like Epiphone. They're good ones and they're terrible ones. Where do I get those offset wrenches I use for tightening lamp sockets and fuse holder nuts? I got it. It's a separate thing, the size, but the one for the lamp holder I got from Mission Guitars. They're out of business, but there's another company that makes those. They're out there. If you were to search a lamp indicator wrench amplifier, you'll find it. Maybe someone can find it. Maybe Wes, you could find that and stick it in the chat. They're out there, but they certainly make life much better. And if you've got one of the Chinese Gretsches and it's great for you, that's fantastic. You found a good one, but an awful lot of the ones are bad. Every time I picked one up in a store, I'm like, oh, put that one right back down. Maybe it's someone else's guitar, but it's not going to be mine. When both volumes are dimed, I'm getting high frequency oscillation. When you turn the presence control up, none with it down. That's not going to... It has nothing to do with the master volume implementation, Plant Pot people. It has to do with the build. Getting an amp stable with all the controls dimed, especially presence, is tricky. And especially in a basement, which does not typically have shielding on the rear panel. So the first thing you need to do is shield the rear panel, put it in place, make sure that the shielding material, and I would use at least heavy-duty aluminum and some spray adhesive, if not sheets of aluminum, which I think I showed how to do one or two live streams back. And then see if you still have the oscillation issues, because shielding prevents oscillation to a large degree. If it does not, then you need to look at your lead dress, your ground scheme, all kinds of things. Tonecraft Audio, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one. $12. Thank you, Wes. Appreciate it. Wes is a great asset to the channel, and I want to take this time to thank you very much, Wes, for all the help you've given me over the past couple of years. And at some point, we're going to have to talk, because I've been asking you to give me your phone number for like 2 years now, and you haven't. Maybe you just get enough of me in these things. But I'd like to get to know you better. Wes is a cool guy. He does, the work he does is awesome. You sent me your phone number. Well, I haven't seen it. Send it again, Wes, and I'll call you. I never got a response, I thought. That could be, and likely is, an error on my part, but sorry. Yeah, the amp models. That'll be another stream. Maybe we'll do a stream. Maybe we'll finally do a stream on travel, and we'll finally do a stream just on the digital modeling stuff. But I know that if I try to do that, someone will be like, "But my deluxe reverb makes a funny noise when I do this." So it's really hard to do a steered stream. And I know that if I were to do amp modeling focused stuff, people would tune out. So, what can I tell you about a 72 Basement 10? It's a very clean amp without much character, and it's got a transformer instead of a phase inverter, which means that it's very linear and clean, and not a lot of people love it. But hey, if you like it, that's what it is. And it's a good version of what it's designed to be. It was just designed to be a thing that a lot of people don't want. Hey, Martin, the only experience I have with Selmer amps is seeing pictures of Paul McCartney using a Selmer Zodiac on some tracks for solos. And that's all I know about Selmers, is that they exist. I've not seen any in the United States. And I think, I can't remember his name. He's an English tech. He does vintage guitar amp repair and instruction. I think he had a Selmer on his channel this week. I think I saw that just yesterday or the day before. Oh, he just came back from Shetland. I hope no one was murdered. Sorry. When I think of Shetland, I think of sweaters, the ponies, and murder. A lot of murder. And I love that show. That was a really great show. It still is. It's still going, even though Jimmy's left. I'm kind of glad Jimmy left, because my wife liked that actor a little too much. I hate for something were to happen to him. Let's see. Well, the Vibrolux reverb wattage is tricky, Jerry, in that the output section is capable of being 40 watts, but it's got an output transformer which is rated at 28 watts. And it's not like, what's the best way to put this? It's not like the maximum wattage of a 28 watt output transformer is it goes to 28 watts. It cannot go any farther. It can reproduce 28 watts cleanly, and above that it compresses. So you get a linear line, and they hit 28 watt limitation. That goes up like this a little bit. So yeah, it's 35 watts. But if you were to put the output transformer from say a super reverb set for the correct impedance load of Vibrolux reverb, you'd have 45 watts. But instead it's at 28 and begins to round off. And so it's that compression. You don't get the full output, but you get a really cool feel. And Gooden likes Shetland murders as well. Thank you. Maybe I'll do a high gain amp later. It's such a weird game to get into. Hey, Marshall Major. Okay, your 4x10 Blues DeVille gives gravelly rapid pulsation. Well, you've got a power break attenuator, and a Blues DeVille 4x10 is expecting a 2 ohm load. What is the impedance options on a power break? I don't think you have a 2 ohm option. I think you have 8 and 16. And power break attenuators are really not well built as far as thermal management goes. Certainly have a tech look at it if you're going to continue to use it. Make sure that all the solder joints are good and that all the caps are in good shape, because that thing does not manage heat well. But if you're giving your hot rod the wrong load, your Blues DeVille the wrong load, and you're doing a lot of attenuation, that is a situation for bad results, which it sounds like you're getting. Hot plate was a great attenuator, D-Trevs. It's just been so outdated. It is a 40-year-old design, also relies on a lot of heat stuff. And given the price of a hot plate, and there's no, I'm not criticizing Andy Marshall. It was a fantastic product for its time. But I think for the same price, you can get the Sur reactive load for like $300, which is much, much better. It actually makes the output transformer react as if it were connected to a speaker as opposed to a dummy load. Let's see. I have experiences with the Victory amps TC. They sound good. They work. I think that they are a little bit artificially expensive to service when they do need service due to the way they were built. They were built to be made to be easy to build once, but hard to take apart. Does the SIR have noise reduction circuit? No, but you don't need noise reduction in your output section. Noise reduction is better done elsewhere. Better to have an amp that doesn't have noise. Anyway, back to the question about Victory amps. They're good. I think, at least in the United States, they're a bit overpriced due to exchange rates. I think in the UK, probably a much better price proposition. They're good quality. Just not from the point of view of someone buying on this market, they don't make that much sense to me. Well, I think if you want an amp that sounds like a Soldano, you should buy a Soldano. If you want an amp that sounds like a Marshall, you should buy a Friedman or a Metro or a Germino. If you want an amp that sounds like a Mesa, you should see a psychiatrist. If you really like the sound of like a dual rectifier, then try the real deal. Go try a Soldano. That's what they're ripping off badly. My Pro reverb seems to flub out and give up when I hit with the dirt pedal, but my JTM45 takes off. Would smaller cathode caps or coupling caps help? The Fender, that's a hard one to know the answer to. They're not dissimilar preamp sections, but the JTM40, and if you're using the bright channel of the JTM45, it has a very balanced low end. Well, most JTM45s have pretty much the same frequency response as a Pro Reverb. I would wonder more if, depending on the levels you're running at, if your Pro Reverb is entirely healthy or whether it's biased incorrectly. Because a JTM45, its coupling caps and the high pass frequencies are very similar in most respects to what you find in a Pro Reverb as far as flubbiness. I don't know what your Pro Reverb is. I don't know if your JTM45 has had any mods. If you have a 73 or later Pro Reverb that has the 330K grid leaks on the phase inverter, and you've got the 10 nanofarad input coupling cap, change that to a 3.3 nanofarad input coupling cap. That will deflub a 70s Pro Reverb. But if you have a 66, it's in good shape. It should be hanging right in with the JTM45 with a dirt pedal. I have done point-to-point conversions, but it's such a lot of work to undo everything that's in there that it becomes almost better just to buy a chassis and start from scratch. And honestly, the reissue, once you fix the flaws I keep pointing out, which are fairly easily remedied, it's a really good sounding amp. If that's what's holding you back from sounding great, it's really not the amp. An awful lot of great players use stock deluxe reverb reissues. Elvis Costello does. Bill Frisell, that's what's in his rider, and he sounds fantastic. Now, if you really want to sound great, the deluxe reverb reissue, usually you want to change the speaker. And you can do the things I've shown in the videos that don't cost much to make them last longer, but it's not like there's something really wrong with the PCB. There are things I change on the PCB, but I don't think that there's any real competitive reason, cost-effective reason, other than maybe pride of ownership or neener rights to make them elaborately more expensive. Hey, Quarter Livermore. Here's one of the things I don't like being put in this position of telling you what to tell your tech, unless you are very, very skillful at making sure all feathers remain unruffled. Because as a tech, I don't want to get a note from a player saying, "Hey, some guy in the internet said you should do this." I'm like, well, then great, take it to some guy on the internet. And also the Deluxe Reverb 2, I try not to work on that era of Fender because they need so much work to be made much better, that it's much more cost effective usually to sell them to someone else and then use that money to buy an amp that's closer to what you want. I would much rather have a Deluxe Reverb reissue, the 65 reissue, than to have a Deluxe Reverb 2, because so much about the Deluxe Reverb 2 needs to be changed at a core fundamental level. And the boards in those things are terrible, and the wiring in those things is terrible, and the overall construction and concept, it just takes so much work. So I would just say, make sure it's safe so I can sell it in good conscience, and then take that money and buy an amp that sounds like what you want. And for a lead channel, a Deluxe Reverb doesn't need a lead channel. There's a world of overdrive and distortion pedals out there, and that world gets bigger all the time. And if you need something that doesn't in the amp, then the Deluxe Reverb is not the amp for that. You want to get something more Marshall-y or Vox-y. Let's see. Thank you, RJ Electric. That's very kind of you. I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Or madam. I don't know what the RJ stands for. Tremolo is working on a Fender Concert Reverb. Great. Moving on. Which tube is the tremolo? If you meant by any chance that it's not working, the tremolo is V4. Oh, a Concert Reverb. That's a model I don't think I've ever seen, a Concert Reverb. You know, the older concerts, it's got the harmonic trim, but the Concert Reverb, I don't know what year that is, Richard. In general, to my ear, for an Alnico speaker, are selections preferable to, say, an Eminence Red Coast Red Fang speaker? I think the Red Fang are discontinued, aren't they? I have preferred Celestion Blue and Gold to the Eminence Red Fang. I also like the Warehouse Black and Blue a lot. And Mojitone has got some really fantastic sounding Alnico speakers as well. This is all for the Voxy JTM45 Celestion version of an Alnico speaker. When it comes to, let's just buy into the marketing and say American Alnico speakers like old Jensen's, I think that Warehouse has some good ones. I've not tried too many of the Eminences that I've liked, though they've got a Legend, is it 1028, that sounds quite good. I think it's the right 1028. And if you, in the vintage series, I'm not a huge fan of the Signature series, except for like a Champ, but the regular vintage series from Weber, tedweberspeakers.com is the way I would go if I needed to put an old funky Alnico kind of speaker in, say, a 58 Deluxe. Thank you, Alan Margolin. Appreciate that. Hey, Joe. The musicians click. Other places have cliques. Nashville just got clicks. Well, it used to be you can just go meet up at the Shoney's on Demumbrian, and you run into everyone in town who was anyone. And there was a Kroger just down the hill from there where people would go to the lunch counter to meet. I think all that's gone. That Kroger's got swallowed up in the Gulch redevelopment, and that Shoney's on Demumbrian's are no longer a thing. And I don't know if anyone can afford to eat in those restaurants that are there now. So as long as I still have, what's the name of that place I like so much over there? Where Church Street turns Elliston Place. Man, anyone who wants to meet me in Nashville will meet at Elliston Place. Grab a burger and a shake. That's the place to go over. Elliston Place at Church Street. Let's see. Hey, Hans Mosel. Would I suggest building a blues amp as a beginner? Well, I say this nicely. As a Memphian, what is a blues amp? Because, looking at a 58 Bassman right there. And people think of Stevie Ray Vaughan as being associated with that, but Stevie Ray didn't use Bassmans very often. B.B. King did, back when he was wearing amazing Bermuda shorts, and he had a horn section in the late 50s. And his was set very clean, and if you were to play that amp, you wouldn't think it sounded anything like blues. And you think like Magic Sam, very clean, say like a super reverb with the reverb turned up, but very, very clean. What is a blues amp? When you get into like the British blues bands, and they start off with Voxes, and they went to Marshalls, and you get into like the Butterfield stuff that's a crank super reverb. Where does it become a blues amp? If I were to go downtown right now to Beale Street and see what they're playing at all the tourist bars, I know that at B.B. King's Blues Club, the stage amps are some Victories, like a Duchess and one of the other ones. And I think I got a JC-120 there. I know the stage amp at the Rumbuki Cafe for a long time was a JC-120. Most of those clubs, there's a lot of PVs being played still, and Marshall JVM series at some of the clubs that are more top 40-ish. What is blues? This is a blues amp in the right hands. These are not those hands, but so here's your blues amp, the original blues amp. Tune this to G. Play with a slide and have a hellhound on your trail, and then get recorded really oddly in a hotel room corner. But I'm sorry if I'm not helping you, but these questions, when I see these things, I have to stop and say, what is a blues amp? Because in my experience, a blues amp is just typically the amp that the player has that he can get a sound out of. And that can be almost anything. Now, I think there are certain amps which make for a more interesting blues sound. So, a crank super reverb is one of those. A 58 Bassman is one of those. But so is this Vibrolux, which is turned off right now. But most of it is the player's approach to making that thing work. But if you want to build an amp as a beginner, I've shown this and talked about this a lot in my stream. Start by building pedals. Make all your mistakes at low voltage, at low current, low heat, low risk of killing yourself. And if you mess up, you're out $40, not $400. You get good at that, then build a champ. And if you want more than that, build a Tweed Deluxe 5E3. And if you can't get blues out of that, it ain't the amp. Albert King did use a JC-120, and he used them live as well, Mr. E-Train. And I heard him play live with his JC-120s, and he sounded horrible. He sounded awful playing his JC-120. I'm sorry. Albert went through a period, Mr. King went through a period where he did not care about anything except getting paid. And he showed up and he did his shtick, and he got paid. Then he complained that he did not get paid enough. But in his prime, especially the stuff he did at Stax with Steve Cropper producing that stuff, that was not a JC-120. And he sounded a lot better when he cared. Hey, Adam Shaw. Are you the Adam Shaw of my past? Curious to know if I have an opinion on automatic Seiko watches. Well, I'm wearing one. I've got 2 automatic Seikos. I think that's right. And I've got 4 or 5 automatics. I like automatic watches. They're not as accurate as my quartzes, let alone than my digitals. And they, take some maintenance, but something about getting all those mechanics into such a small space and still getting any degree of accuracy. I like that. It appeals to my mind. There's a parallel to what I do. Different Seiko automatics have different degrees of accuracy. This is an SPB 143, which is more accurate than something else I've got, which has got the NH55. But, if I wanted to be accurate, I just use my G-Shock all the time, which is more accurate than the cell phones. But it's not always about accuracy. It's also about beauty of design. So some Seikos are great. Some are crappy. Do a lot of research before you buy one, but there's nothing wrong with having one. Or 13. I think that's where I'm at right now. Not all Seikos, but... Let's see. I'll let you know, Richard, about the pedals. Hey, TC, I'm not a fan of the company Morgan, so I have not tried the AC-20 because I've tried their PR-30, and I was shocked and horrified by the con that they're pulling on the public. So I have not been inclined to take a look at their other offerings. Oh, I had a plush P1000S, and it had a bad transformer. And I got something from Hammond, though I don't remember the model number. I can't tell you the best overall price, including shipping, for a 125 P34A, but I would start with Hammond's, and CE Distribution, tubesandmore.com sells Hammonds, and I'd check out and see if Mojotone/Habor have one, and both of those are going to be good quality, and just see which one price works better for you. What is negative feedback and how it affects the sound of an amp? Good question. Let's see if I can answer it without charts and graphs. Earlier I talked about how if you have 2 sine waves, positive and negative, and they overlap and they're 180 degrees out of phase with each other, they're going to cancel each other out. You won't hear anything from 2 identical signals. It doesn't have to be just a sine wave. It can be full spectrum music if they're exactly time aligned, exactly the same on either side, but 180 degrees out of phase with each other. The polarity is totally reversed, because phase and polarity are related but not the same thing. Anyway, I digress. Then you'll have no sound. You won't hear anything, even though all that signal is there. What if you wanted to introduce just a little bit of the stuff that's out of the wrong? So instead of having 2 things that are equal value, but inverted polarity, they're going to cancel each other out. What if you wanted to introduce just a little bit of one inverted signal, but only at specific frequencies, and only by so much, so you can get a little bit of cancellation? That's what negative feedback does. And so if you have negative feedback and then a presence circuit, it's going to say, I'm going to feed a little bit of the output back into the input of the phase inverter. But we're going to invert the polarity, so it's going to cancel itself out just a little bit, and it can slightly control the low end response. It can lower noise. It can give a better dynamic feel. And then if you were to say, well, we're going to have more negative feedback for the lows than the highs, then all of a sudden the highs get louder because they're not being canceled out. And that's how we get presence where, oh, it's bright when I turn the presence up. If I turn the presence all the way counterclockwise, it gets darker. Well, that's the most negative feedback across all the frequencies. And in the middle, you're having the lows fully negative feedback, and then the mids and highs with less negative feedback, but still some. And you turn the presence up, and it's like all the lows and mids are here, and the highs have no negative feedback. So it's both a way of controlling the feel, especially of bass response in an amplifier, and how cleanly the notes speak, and lowering the overall noise floor, but also a way of controlling the general EQ of the output section. Hopefully that helps. For more on that, I think Uncle Doug's got full videos, which would be great to look at. I don't think you should buy a PV amp today. The stuff that's being made today that says PV is not the PV of old, and the PV that was of old is now old, and the parts for them is not available. You want to get a blues amp, buy the best amplifier in your area that you can afford, and don't worry about whether it's a blues amp. I guarantee you that if I were to go buy a Boss Katana 50 for $250 and take it, I could take it to Wild Bill's tonight, Saturday night. Go to Wild Bill's and go up to the guy who's playing blues at Wild Bill's tonight and say, hey, I brought you an amp. You can have it if you like it. He'd like the out of that amp, and he would use it. And all of a sudden, a Boss Katana 50 would be a blues amp. And for those of you who've been to Memphis who know Wild Bill's, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking actual juke joint, the actual deal. Blues has never been a genre of amp design. And great blues players have usually had to use whatever they could afford, which has not often been very much. Now, we got into the period with all the white guys in the 60s discovering the blues, and they had deeper pockets. And so we have Marshalls, and we've got super reverbs. At the same time, the guys, the black guys, like I said, Magic Sam, he was doing well. He had his mohair suit. You look at the tour of the UK with Howlin' Wolf. He was dressed to the nines, and that Hubert Sumlin had some good amps on that. I think Hubert Sumlin was even using some Selmers on that tour. So the best amp that you can afford is the blues amp, if you can play blues. I don't play blues. I play blues-inspired stuff, and I love the blues to the point where I know that I am not an authentic bluesman. I don't think anyone wants to listen to seasonal affective disorder music. It's not quite got the same ring to it. I'm trying to be nice about this, and I'm not belittling anyone's views, but I know how much the blues gets romanticized in the rest of the world. And I'm here in Memphis, Tennessee, home of the blues. We'll argue about it with New Orleans, and we'll both win. The trouble with the Delta Blues 1x15, Mr. E-Train, and I like the Delta Blues, but the trouble with the Delta Blues is the chassis is not secured to the cabinet well, and so the whole thing rocks back and forth. The EL84s are not well protected in transit. The EL84s like to come loose out of those sockets and go sideways, and it's got some 5-watt resistors that like to toast the board, and when it needs to be recapped, it's extremely expensive because of all the glue that's on the board, and if it needs new pots, those pots aren't available anymore. So I think back when a Delta Blues was new and inexpensive, it wasn't a bad choice, but there are better options than a PV Delta Blues. And I just say that as a tech who knows the behind-the-scenes stuff. I know what's happening behind the Tolex. And as someone who's trying to look out for musicians, I'm not trying to make a bunch of money off people. I make my money off my blues lawyers, and I love my blues lawyers. But I also will try to save a player a buck when it's possible. Like here, is there any benefit to installing a choke on a Jet City? Nope, there's no benefit. You waste $30 in parts and $100 in labor and have an amp that still sounds like a Jet City JCA 20 HV. There's nothing wrong with sounding like a Jet City. It's a good little amp for what it is, but it is what it is, and that's what it should be. Josh Hufford, I'm glad. That's why I do this. You know, a lot of stuff I put out here is stuff that I wish I had known back when I was a broke gigging musician. And now I'm a broke non-gigging semi-musician. So what do I think about the PRS American Silver Sky pickups? It's hard for me to judge the sound of those pickups because I associate them with that Fisher-Price looking Strat copy. And I whatever for that. I have zero interest. I've never picked one up because I don't care, because it's deliberately ugly. PRS has got some beautiful guitars. Strats are one of the most beautiful designs of all time, and the Silver Sky is just a big old flying fickle finger of fate to any concept of aesthetics and beauty. And so I don't care if it sounds good. It's fugly. But if it's like any other PRS I've played, typically the pickups are too bright. Someone's gonna be like, oh, he's got an opinion on guitar he's never even played. Well, my opinion is that's too ugly to try. So I don't care. If they want me to try it, make it at least as good looking as the design it's copying. And I'd tell that to Paul's face. I've spoken to Paul. He's a great guy. Very smart. He can take it. And I have tremendous respect for his accomplishments in the industry. And I understand he had to do the Silver Sky because that's what John Mayer wanted. I do feel sorry for these companies who partner with people like that. Not anything wrong with John Mayer specifically, but you know, John Mayer had the signature Strats until he wasn't a Fender player anymore. Now he's a PRS guy, and PRS has got this whole model. What if he goes with another company next year? You know, it's like watching what happened with Music Man and Van Halen and PV and Van Halen, and now, you know, then EVH, and, you know, chasing endorsers, signature models seems like a very risky thing for a lot of companies to do. Make a lot of money in short term possibly, but you can also get burned. And it also seems strange to me to have an artist signature version of a Les Paul, which is already an artist signature. And, you know, let's say I've got an Eric Johnson Strat, and I think I got the Eric Johnson Strat despite the fact that it's an Eric Johnson association. It's just the best production Strat Fender's made in a really long time, I thought. But he also didn't do anything radical to it. He just said, hey, make it like my 56. And they did, and it was good. You know, let's get back to people's questions. Any opinion on the circuit board-based Black Cats? I have no experience with them, sorry. Is it common for old input jacks on guitars to get crackly? Goody Guitars asks. It's common for all input jacks to get crackly over time. They get dirty. Dirt gets in between all the connections. They need some help. Easy to clean usually. And Plant Pot People's got a good suggestion on that. Yeah. Quarter Livermore, thank you very much. Sending in a deluxe reverb too. All right, well, I already answered that. I apologize for not maybe giving you the answer you wanted, especially now that I see there's a super chat for it. But, you know, whether my advice is paid for or free, it's the same. I wouldn't spend too much money, any money beyond strictly necessary to get that thing in a safe, sellable condition, and then find an app that works better for you. Yeah, effects loop switching jacks are a great example of the need to keep your jacks clean. You gotta clean off your jacks, and if you rephrase that, you get banned. Oh, Martin, you've got years of experience. You're just stingy with yours, so people are stuck with mine. Yeah, I guess Fender will get it. Well, here's the thing: Fender has now found a way to make money off people selling Gibsons. Wes, you're very welcome, John Hogg. Let's see. Hey, Joseph Slovak. He's got a high watt high five. I hear a faint 60 cycle hum, even with all the tubes removed. It's not outrageous, but noticeable as compared to my other amps. Expected for this price point. P.S. Nice watch. Thank you very much. I think you maybe the output transformer orientation, or just that it's physically too close to the power transformer. And in a more expensive amp, I'd be up in arms about it. I think that the high five is a pretty inexpensive amp. So I think you're probably okay. But in general, you should not hear any hum from the speaker if all the tubes are out of an amp. You may hear hum from the power transformer if the amp is powered on with no tubes present, but it should not be a very loud noise. Let's see. I have tested some of the Mojo Tone speakers. I tried one of their Alnicos not long ago. I really liked it. I've got one of theirs over there to try out in a Tweed Deluxe build. And I appreciate your offer, MBM Carp FL. Man, some usernames are harder to use conversationally than others. I really appreciate your offer. I would take you up on it, but I've got a relationship with Mojo Tone. I can call those guys and have them send me a bunch to try, and I might do that at some point. The trouble is, because of the nature of what I've set out to do here, if I were to borrow a bunch of speakers from a company, and then I said, well, this one was great. This one was really great. These two, I think people could find uses for, but this one, I don't see why this one exists. I won't get anything else from that company. I've burned a bridge for no real reason, but I would not say these are all swell. You should buy these just to maintain a relationship. So these are situations I tend to avoid whenever possible, so that if a customer provides an amp and it has a speaker, and I'm like, hey, this speaker sounds great, or this speaker sounds awful, I'm not biting a hand that potentially might feed me. Neither am I giving the impression that any hands are feeding me. I'm getting no. My mind keeps going to dirty places. Anyway, yeah. So this is a family show, So I tend to avoid those situations, but I would like to try some more of their products. But they would have to be okay with me saying, not for me. Some companies are real understanding of that, Some companies aren't. Like I love Strats, and I love Tellys, and I love Jazzmasters, and I have zero interest in a Mustang or a Jaguar. And if it's some new company that those are their models, and I said, hey, the Mustang, I feel like it's a toy, and I feel like I'm playing way too hard for this Jaguar. A good company would say, okay, that's why we make different scale lengths for different players. Some companies be like, well, you're on our blacklist. You said something potentially negative. We're never going to do business with you again. So I just don't do business with the companies. Other channels do, and they have to walk that tight rope. And even with the best of intentions, they find themselves beholden, if you understand what I'm saying. Hey, John Pardo, I'm about to own a 50-year-old amp. Is there a particular video of yours where I go into cleaning and recommend products? Not just internals, but knobs, switches, Tolex panels. I don't think I have a video specifically on that. Maybe I should. Maybe next time I get a really dirty amp, I will. In general, have a sense of what solvents are the strongest and which are the weakest. As long as you can control, have a hot air gun. Number one, have a hot air gun or at least a hair dryer, because the number one best solvent to try first, actually the first solvent to try, and it's not always effective, but sometimes it is hot breath. Just the moisture from your breath, just go, and then wipe it up. But beyond that, sometimes warm water is all you need. But when you put water on metal, you want to make sure it's off. So follow up with a hairdryer if necessary. For knobs on old Fenders, I will take the knobs off. Some periods of Fenders you can wash them. Some periods of Fenders you can even use an ultrasonic. Others, if they get wet, all the white lettering goes away. So don't. I use WD-40 to clean those. WD-40 and a very, very soft bristle toothbrush, and I'll use the toothbrush on the little ridges on the knobs. I don't use it on the flat surfaces where the numbers are. If it's a Marshall panel, which has that silk screening on top of the metal, don't clean those. You can use a microfiber duster on those. That's about all you want to do, unless you have maybe some stickum in an area where there absolutely is no print. You want to make sure that you're okay with knowing, hey, that's only going to get so clean, because if I got it perfectly clean, it would look weird. For chassis, WD-40 is your friend. WD-40 will almost never hurt any panels, though you don't want to use it on a plastic panel. Like if you have an acrylic panel, you don't want to use any kind of harsh solvent on that. You don't want to use an alcohol on an acrylic panel. Again, warm water, especially on an acrylic panel where the text is behind. Warm water, making sure it doesn't run down between the panel and the chassis. And don't use a heat gun on an acrylic panel, obviously. But if you get any water on the metal of your chassis, go ahead and get that up as fast as possible. Switches, I tend to use deoxit on the inside of the switches, and for like a bright switch on a Fender, like on this one, if I need to clean the front of it, I'll spray some WD-40 into little metal container, I got little stainless steel bowls, and I'll use a Q-tip just to get that on there, because I know it's not going to hurt the panel. I know it's not going to hurt the plastic of the switch, and it smells good, whatever residue's left. Tolex, I tend just to use warm water, sometimes with a tiny bit of soap. You can go crazy in doing like Meguiar's and Mother's stuff from car dealerships. Don't use Armor All, but there are products that car places sell that are great. But I tend to tell my clients, if you want it to be perfect, I'm not Martha Stewart. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to make sure that it's electronically great, and I'll get the majority of the dirt off. If you want to do detail work beyond that, there are tons of videos on that. So warm water with a tiny bit of dish soap is about what I'll do, sometimes with a very soft brush to get the little grooves in the Tolex. But I'm not trying to make it look like it's brand new or shiny. I'm just trying to get all this dirt off where I had to remove the handle, get all a bunch of rust off the chrome, and underneath where the handle was just 40 years of funk. Just get all that clean and put it back together, so it's not going to get any worse, if that makes sense. Martin, yeah, that's right. Gooden, Selmer amp, vintage guitar amp repair and online guitar channel. Martin is a great player and he's good tech. And if you want to know more about Selmer's, he's got a video up in the last week, in the last couple of days, I think. I enjoy Martin's videos. Thank you very much, Mr. Colby Jack. So is the Bassman 10 a precursor to the later ultralinear line? No. It was just I think it was just a period where they're like trying to make an amp for less money, and they figured, for whatever reason, if we do this little transformer, this transformer probably costs about the same or less than the 12 AT7, but then it's not going to be, I think they probably just got a good deal on that transformer, because it's not a very powerful transformer just to take the place of a phase inverter tube. Gave him a very clean sound, very inexpensive to build, and you would never need to change out the tube. But it's a very different approach than the ultralinear stuff. Mr. E-Train, no, the Vibrolux reverb's got a very small output transformer, and the Pro reverb has got basically twin reverb just scaled for two 606s versus 4. The Pro reverb and the Super reverb have very similar output transformers. Pro reverb is closer to twins. I think the Pro reverb and the Bandmaster might have the same, but those are much heftier, heavier, more powerful transformers than the one in the Vibrolux. Let's see. Thank you, Jorge. I appreciate that. I'm glad to be making your Saturdays. I enjoy talking to with everyone. I hate the smell of baby wipes because I've wiped too many babies. And that sounds really weird, but I have 2 kids and I went through all that. I don't like the smell of baby wipes. I don't ever want to smell a graham cracker again. Don't ever want to smell a Cheez-It again. Don't ever want to smell Oreos again. I hate the smell of ketchup now from toddlers. And my God, you find that sippy cup that had been under the couch for a week and you're making homemade cottage cheese. Well, that's a smell it's easy to avoid these days. I don't ever want to smell that again either. Let's see. Trying to make sure we got the last 4 minutes. Let's see if I caught all the questions. And if you asked a question and I'm not answering it now, it's because it doesn't have question marks, so I didn't see it. All right, Nipples the titmouse. Well, I've already answered your question. Thank you very much again on the watch. And I just want to point out, I think I missed it before, that you have this week's username, Nipples the titmouse. Well played, sir or madam. Let's see. Saw a PRS on Zera 20s going for $500 used. Specs seem amazing. What's the catch? Well, they sound terrible and they're not made very well. Those are the catches. So yeah, it makes sense that they're going 500 used. Avoid them while they're hot. I think you should skip them. Ponce in Atlanta, man, I miss is it the Majestic there at Ponce near Peachtree? I miss my Atlanta days. Of course, the Atlanta I know is 30 something years ago, so I'm sure it's all changed. Let's see. Looking for any other questions before we wrap up for the day. I apologize. I like that everyone's talking to each other. It does make it hard to see some of the questions. I've never worked on a Kitty Hawk. I've seen the inside of one. I was not thrilled by the fragile construction, but that might have just been the one that I saw. I've not had any sample size of them. Other than Rev Beach, I'm not sure if I know of any players who really used them. I don't know how long he used them. I think he got them until he got a deal with someone else. Regarding conductive eyelet boards, in addition to removing wax, heating, driving out moisture, etc., do I ever create distance between the top and bottom board using a nylon standoff? No. The bottom board should be inert. Once you get it all done, the bottom board is no longer a conductor, it's an insulator again. And therefore, I don't need to insulate the top board from the insulator. If I still have conductivity from the bottom board, then my work is not done. All right, we are getting caught up. And this is the part where I say, hey, we're about to wrap this up, and then there's like 20 other questions. Good, reliable instrument cable. I have bad ones from Fender. Well, I make my own Pastor, but the best ones that you can just buy, you can get them any major guitar store. Mogami with Neutrik connectors. That's what I like. Mogami with Neutrik connectors. And don't pay extra for gold plating or any of that stuff. But Mogami, everything I do is Mogami with Neutrik connectors. I just like them. They sound great. They're easy to work with. They're reliable. They don't have a lot of memory in terms of wanting to stay coiled up and tangling everywhere. And I love the silent plug. The silent plug is just fantastic. What's my opinion on Synergy amps? I know they exist. I know some of the guys who make them, and they're really good designers and engineers. And I have every expectation that they are very good, but I've not tried one myself or had one in. So I don't have any opinion other than they exist, and they're probably quite good. The 65 is the best reissue of the Deluxe Reverb reissue. The 68 takes so much work to be put to the 65 specs. And all the 68 is a 65 reissue that Fender modded kind of harshly. And there is no older reissue than the 65. The 65 reissue is the first reissue they ever did. Piano Demon 109. My availability for working on an amp. I'm booked for a good while right now, and I'm sorry. I get a lot. I'm flattered. I get a lot of requests to take in work, and I take in work, and then I'm booked for a little bit. It takes a long time to get through some of these things, and I do more work than you see on the channel. So it's not like I've just been working on this one amp for 3 days. But I've only had time to do little videos on that one amp over the past couple of days. Thank you, though. Favorite Gretsch guitar? I think I'd probably just go for a big old single cut Country Gentleman if I could. Maybe a double cut. I don't know. I like the looks more than I like the feel, but there are cool things. You know, but a lot of the sounds that particularly George Harrison got with them, I think are kind of clunky. If I listen to a lot of that stuff, I'm not a huge fan of some of those sounds. Or some of those sounds you could have done with, I think, better with the 335. I don't have the same fanatic nostalgia that a lot of Beatles fans have. I've played a Rickenbacker 325, and I'm 6'2". I can't play a Rickenbacker 325. John Lennon was what, 5'8", 5'9", and it was a tiny little thing on him too. You know, he grew up learning to play ukulele, so it basically was an electric ukulele. But then he went to large, full size guitars. You didn't see that little Rick anymore. It's odd to me how the Beatles used whatever they had for so long. They were making other people millions of dollars, and they're still playing the first semi-good guitars they got. I don't think they realized that they could have anything they wanted in the world. And it's funny. It's the same way they continued to have all the world's money, but they just would be happy eating beans on toast. I feel sorry for anyone who willingly eats beans on toast. Much love to my British friends, but my God, it's boring. Anyone, I think we're going to wrap up now. Is Hollywood dead, and will we ever return to truly great movies? Is the theater really dead? The dangling conversation. I'm trying to think of the last truly great movie I've seen. I don't know. I go to the movies so infrequently. I still haven't made the time to see Oppenheimer, so I don't know. I'm the wrong person to ask about current movies. You want to talk about old movies? I'll be glad to talk about old movies with you. Spoiler, I don't give a shit about Scorsese. And most Coppola, I think, is kind of crappy as well. So I may not be the person you want to talk about movies, but I don't know. I have issues with some of the Chris Nolan stuff as well. But it's not Lyle's opinions on everything's. It's Lyle's opinions about the stuff he actually has concrete, objective experience with, for the most part. Any thought on what tubes to pair with the GA SE-64 and Deluxe Reverb in channel 1 mostly? I mean, at the beginning of the stream, St. Caroline, someone asked me about tubes to use in a Princeton Reverb. Same answer applies to the Deluxe Reverb in terms of current production stuff. When I did the shootout with speakers, including the GA, the tubes in that amp were just a mismatch of tubes that I had here that all tended to work, that were just in my box of spares. I cobbled together a set that worked for me to test the amp in, and it sounded great. Victor, we'll get to this, where the sound of an amp comes from next time. That's going to be much, much longer strat. Quarter Livermore, that's very kind of you. Well, I'd love to talk about movies. I love talking about movies. Guest, did you just get here? Just in time to be offended by my slamming the beans on toast, which is so boring. I'm going to go a little bit long because I want to talk about this. So when I travel, I try to have the real local specialties. So when we were in Portugal and it was June and the grilled sardines were in season, I had grilled sardines. And I don't like fish, but I ordered them. And the first one was really kind of good. And the second one had a raw gut sack in the middle. And I thought, this is what I get for trying. Then later on that trip, we go to Florence. And the specialty in Florence is tripe sandwiches. My wife was horrified, but I ordered one. I tried it. And it was just boring. It was real mushy. It didn't have any good texture. It's kind of like the inside of a hot dog, more liquidy though. Not a great sandwich, but the authentic specialty. I tried it. So in Paris, and they have this thing called the croissant. I made myself have several. Real hardship. Same thing for Vienna, where I had to try various things with custards and creams. It was the hardship of trying things. Then we were in London. Okay, we go to Greg's sausage roll. That's some solid shit there, man. But we made ourselves go to an authentic local calf. And we chose, what's the name of the place? I can't remember. Calf over by the British, the Tate Britain. Very famous calf and cafe for those of us who acknowledge that France exists. And we had a full English breakfast. So the beans on toast and the brown sauce and the eggs and the blood pudding and their alleged bacon. It was so bad. I felt sorry for everyone because what happened in the American South is that all these Scottish immigrants came here and discovered what happens when you not only have controlled the world's economy for a century to have access to spices, but that you actually then use those spices. So to anyone from the UK, come here. Let me show you what toast can be. Let me show you what an egg fried in bacon fat is. What real bacon is, by the way. And please, please, please stop serving people frozen hash browns. They're disgusting. And if you want to see what baked beans can be, come to Memphis and I'll get you some barbecue beans. I'm trying to remember, was it Astral Calf? No, this one was Marshall Major. This calf was definitely run by a Londoner. It's been going since forever. That was the place we wanted to try, and the other one was over in the East End, Peligi's, but Peliani's. I don't remember the name, but we didn't find ourselves to get didn't get over to the East End, so we went to the Regency Calf, and we were expecting it to be much more good. And it just was not. And I felt sorry for everyone who got so used to World War II rations that they came to love the taste. So please, told my Brit friends, you control the world's spice trade for centuries. Try some pepper. It won't kill you. All right, much love and good humor to everyone, especially my Brit friends who I was just giving some shit to. Speaking of giving shit to Brits, hello, Brad. Goodbye, Brad. We get time to go. If Brad's doing a stream today, pop it down here so everyone can jump over on your stream. People who aren't tired of sitting around talking about amps and stuff. It wasn't bad luck, Marshall Major. It was authentic. It was authentic, but the full English is just not much of a thing. Brad, are you going to do a stream? Might be a walk. Well, that's cool. All right. Well, maybe people can check out Brad for a walk later. And we'll all together avoid durian, which smells even worse than the homemade cheese my kids used to make. So let's get to this part that I keep remembering to do. I really appreciate you all being here. If I've missed anyone's questions, I apologize. We only have 3 hours for this. And sometimes we got to talk about baked beans and why they should not come straight from a Heinz can without any other doctoring. Because no, just no.